Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Burn the Corporate Fiction. Here we are on this corporate tax plantation, just beating the same drum about the impending digital enslavement. But we must beat this drum because, I mean, this is the most important thing anybody should be focusing on, period. There's no question about that. If this system gets set up, there's no coming back from it. And let me tell you, if you guys, if you're watching this and you have not realized that we're in the middle of a spiritual battle, absolutely spiritual battle, that we are in the book of Revelation, right? Absolutely, which I'll get into in a moment. And on this channel, of course, you have to have a connection with the Creator in order to be able to study the law and know it as I do. However, I generally try to shy away from being overly zealous about my relationship with the Creator. So, however, we're now getting into the final moments here of that book, right? And I don't think people even realize, just like it says, that this AI digital governance system is the beast. It's the beast system. It's 100% the beast system. There's no question about it. And so much so that this morning, I've prepared some information to show you guys that the very developers of AI know what they're doing. They know that this thing it's the Antichrist. They know it. They don't care. They're like compelled to continue to develop it, fund it, and for whatever reason. And so there's actually a thread that links, the NASA space program, Jack Parsons, Aleister Crowley, all those people, the intelligence agencies, the Epstein circle, right, with the tech giants, okay, the technocrats, and of course politicians. They're all part of the same club, and now we see what that club is, because we notice they all have one thing in common: they participate in dark satanic rituals. And now, of course, this is going to tie into the law. Actually, it's all about the law. When you think about it, what is the Bible? The Bible is a book of law. It's a trust indenture. It's the only trust indenture, the one that they mimicked and created a counterfeit trust indenture to lock everybody, to bar the access to law, right? Because trust cannot be adjudicated in law. It has to be adjudicated in equity. So if you did not watch my previous stream, where I really did a deep dive into the difference between law and equity, and exactly why they're choosing to make everything a pure equity situation when it comes to laws, because they're trying to replace God. They're trying to steal the authority. And what they want to do is they want to create this earthly kingdom where they exist outside of and parallel to God's creation. It's going to be a counterfeit creation of their own, and no one will be entitled to the mercy or salvation of God. So if you enter the system. Now, that may sound extreme, but hopefully when I'm finished with my presentation this morning, everyone will see exactly where I'm coming from. So before I get into that, let me say hi to those of you who have shown up already. We have Pat, Mojo Shop. Good to see both of you. Heron Song. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. We have Sergeant Frog Dog. Good to see you, man. And to those of you watching but not chatting, good to have you. So I didn't start this with a video like I ordinarily do, because the video I'm about to play may be copyright struck, right? So, or not struck, but just be like, oh, well, this is going to be blocked unless you cut out this section of the video. So maybe not, but it's very important. I want to show it to you guys, because this is exactly what I've been warning everybody about as far as the system is concerned. This is exactly what they will do if they get this set up. So bear with me for a second. We're going to go ahead and show this.
Good morning, citizens. Your overnight account balances have been updated. Time to start a productive day. Final notice, your account balance is below 500. You need 50 credits by the end of the day to avoid automatic eviction. If you have missed work due to illness, you must provide a doctor's note to reclaim your credits.
Any extra credits? Please.
Attention
Tensions are high today, with more people planning to join the Citizens Against Digital Control protest. Remember, the government knows who you are at all times. Resisting is not worth the consequences. All of their newest social credit systems are designed to keep you and your families safe and efficient.
Authorities seized a record balance of an individual's credits, citing excessive hoarding.
Good morning, citizens. Your overnight account
Traffic
balances
violation
have been
detected.
updated.
7 miles per
Start
hour
deducting
over the
day.
limit. 75 credits have been automatically deducted. Final notice,
That
your account
partic-
balance is below 500. You need 50 credits by the end of the day to avoid automatic eviction. If you have missed work due to illness, you must provide a doctor's note to reclaim your credits.
It's weird, I can't pause it.
Your blood work shows a significant iron deficiency. I recommend incorporating more red meat into
Any
your
extra
diet.
credits? Please.
Dr. Jones, your taxes were not
Tensions
filed
are
and
high
have
today,
been
with more
automatically
people planning
deducted
to
with
join
late
the
fees.
Citizens Against
Your
Digital
medical
Control
license has been
protest.
revoked.
Remember, the government
hell
knows who you
nah,
are at all
follow
times.
extension.
Resisting is not worth the consequences. All of their newest social credit systems are designed to keep you and your families safe and efficient.
Authorities seized a record balance of an individual's credits, citing excessive hoarding.
Purchase denied. Monthly red meat allowance exceeded. Traffic
violation
mealworms
detected.
instead. 7 miles per hour over the limit. 75 credits have been automatically deducted.
You have to be fucking kidding me.
Yep, you got the flu.
Your blood work shows a significant iron deficiency.
Unauthorized
I recommend
political gathering
incorporating
detected.
more red meat into
Participants'
your
access
diet.
to financial services has been suspended. Dr. Jones, your taxes were not filed and have been automatically deducted with late fees. Your medical license.
That was so weird. It just automatically glitched up like that, probably because this is a damning video. Or just maybe my computer's being a little bit retarded. But either way, this part with the car where she's driving and it's like, oh, speed infraction detected, deducting 50 credits. Of course, that's exactly what they want. No due process, no opportunity to challenge the jurisdiction, no opportunity to challenge whether or not the administrative regulations apply to you. If you're like me and you've removed your estate from administration by claiming it on the public record, which it's also a vicious performance contract, by the way, which has already worked, actually. It got a $6,800,000 lien against 3 court officers and a police officer's property in Colorado. So, but anyways, if you like that, then see, they're trying to eliminate the ability to even challenge the validity of their administrative system, right? So last stream, I went over exactly how you end up being pulled out of law, how you end up under administration and in courts of equity. I'll cover it briefly here for a second because it's very important to this presentation as well. Law, man did not create law and man cannot create law. This is such a fundamentally important thing to understand. And up till about 200 years ago, 150 years ago, this was common knowledge among students of the law that man cannot make actual law. Now they call the rules that they make law, but they always usually put something in front of like civil law, administrative law, but it's not law. Now, when you read the Constitution or the Articles of Confederation or any old document prior to the 1900s, legal document, when they're referring to law, they're referring to the common law. And man did not create the common law. Man merely discovered it, wrote about it. And a little bit of critical thinking about this topic will reveal that to be the truth. Think about everything that is a crime at common law. It's always a harm. It's always it's violating the free will of another living soul. Okay. And those things are like, say, theft, murder, trespass, right? And all of them, they require a victim for it to be a crime. And this is a big thing you guys need to learn to, when you're in the courtroom, these administrative, they're banks pretending to be courts, and you're challenging jurisdiction, you ask them, is this a court of law or a court of equity? Those things, though, that are illegal or that are unlawful at common law, that are crimes at common law, man did not create. Like, hey, you know what? I think this ought to be against the law. People shouldn't really do this. No, it's inherently known, just like a maxim at law, right? Which is not invented, but merely identified. It is a universally applicable concept without needing to be created or written down or any of this stuff. Everybody knows. Okay. Now, why do I bring this up? Because this is so important to what do you think if they were waging war against the heavens and they're trying to replace God? What do you think it is that they would be waging war against? The law. It's the only thing they could be waging war against and trying to take over. And they 100% are. And you look at this, and I've done a stream about it before, that it seems like when you get to the bottom of all these things, there's a bunch of sodomites, you know? And when you think about it, well, that's unlawful. It's unnatural, according to common law. Okay. And so, you know, it's certain things like that where they're angry at God for making them the way that they are, and angry at God for, you know, the law. And so they're trying to take over his jurisdiction. So equity, the rise of equity came with the rise of the use of trusts in the Western world after William the Conqueror in England. Now, I covered that last stream. I'm not going to get super into detail because we got a lot of stuff to cover today. But the equity deals with fictions. Okay, primarily. That's the purpose of equity. I'll give you a good example of equity. All right. So equity deals with what's supposedly morally right or wrong, but in fictitious situations. Okay, that's why it's left up to the conscience of the judge. Originally, it was the king handled questions of chancery. And then he ended up that the court, or the chancellor, position of chancellor in the courts of chancery were created. And they were run by the priest class. And the priest basically claimed to hold the conscience of the king. Well, it's that same attitude and that same style of court exists today under the name equity, where the judge acts as a king. All right. But it's because they're supposed to be dealing with fictitious situations, not living men and women. So they figured out how to reduce people to the trustee of their own, to a mere trustee and chattel property of their own estate. Not even a trustee as in it's your estate, but just property, because the owner they presume to be missing or dead. That's why the IRS labels you a decedent, right? So in equity, you cannot invoke the law, because the law doesn't matter in equity, if that makes sense. You can't be like, my constitutional rights, or I have the right to travel, or whatever the case may be. This is why this fails, is because if you get past the arraignment and you try to argue your case in a trial, you've already agreed that you're a trustee under administration, under a trust indenture. All of your property is all your registrable property is tied to your social security number and held in trust as collateral for the public debt. And part of this arrangement is that they can use that property to generate revenue. That's why they attach account numbers to it all the time. So, it's all about being attached to the primary treasury account, which is your social security number. It's your social security, right? And then if you have a minor account, we'll get into that if we have time, because that's actually 31 Code of Federal Regulations. They admit, and this is also why you're an infant, is because you've never claimed your minor account. Anyways, I'm digressing off into the law. The point is what they are doing, and this is what I believe that the Tower of Babel was. Okay, it was reducing people to property using the ancient system of pledging, allowing man to become a legislator, because man can write whatever rules he wants, but he cannot apply them against the free will of another man unless there's some sort of contractual or trust relationship between the two. There has to be, or unless the man's rules are in concordance with the actual law, right? So then it takes on the color of law. It doesn't need consent. So let's explain the color of law. This is a confusing concept for a lot of people too. Color of law is when something that is not a law can be enforced as a law against you. And in order for something to take the color of law, there has to be a proper arrangement, either a contractual relationship or a trust arrangement. So if you're in a court of equity at all, the question should be, what contract or trust arrangement do you presume me to be a part of? That should be the question. Okay, let's finish watching this. This is wild. And yes, but real quick, the Tower of Babel, now they're trying to make a worldwide Tower of Babel by creating a world trust. It's the fulfillment of unum sanctum. And they are placing the world in bondage, debt, sin, right? Perpetual bondage under the beast system. You'll never, and if they get this set up, you'll never be able to get out of it.
Due to the speeding infraction, your car will be immobilized for 3 days.
Fuck you! Take your surveillance policies and rot in hell!
You've earned 50 bonus credits for reporting your neighbor's hateful misconduct.
Yep.
This content exceeds your current social credit tier. May we suggest citizen responsibility?
See that? You can totally see that, controlling what you could watch based on your social credit score. Yeah, you can't watch anything entertaining. You are a bad citizen, right? You need some re-education programming. Absolutely, this is what they want. It's massively insane.
Sarah, open the door. You have been identified by the authorities. Don't resist. Don't resist. Don't resist.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of that. So when you think about what AI is in itself, and this is what I want to get into, is the esoteric aspect of behind AI. There's a lot of occultism behind AI and the creation of AI, just like the space programs, just like the intelligence agencies. There's these very dark forces, right, that they want you to believe are aliens. That's really what they're trying to push. That was the whole purpose of the NASA thing, I personally think, separate you from God, make you believe that the demons are aliens, right? So, but you have these occult rituals. It seems to be where they get the knowledge from. And when you think about what is, it's the Kabbalah. Okay. So Tucker Carlson just did an interview with this guy, who said pretty much the same thing that I think as well. It was an excellent interview, even though I think Tucker Carlson's a CIA operative and he pretended not to know what the Kabbalah is, but clearly he does because he has a red bracelet on, or hat. I don't think he wears it anymore since he was called out on it. But anyways, what is the Kabbalah? Well, the Jews picked it up in Babylon, and the Kabbalah is it's like the forbidden knowledge of the secrets of the laws of creation. It's absolutely what it is. And it is the manipulation of those laws, which actually led to the modern banking system. That's why if you look at the doors of the Bank of England, right, there's literally a hermetic staff on each of the doors with wings, right? It's Kabbalistic. It's Hermeticism. And that demonstrates that they're very much aware of these fundamental laws, and primarily that law is the exchange between the polarities. I'm going to get a little bit biblical on you for a second. You read in Genesis, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light. Well, there is a whole bunch of stuff hidden right there in that paragraph that everyone glosses over. It tells you the binary nature of this creation. It tells you that God created the darkness before the light. It tells you that both are necessary. And in fact, that entire section of the Bible is the allegory of the interplay between the two polarities to generate life. The Spirit of God, so the face of the deep, darkness upon that's the waters, and then the Spirit of God, right, moves upon the waters and creates light. Those two things came together. Now, the light is the light and the darkness together. There's dark light and then there's light, right? And the entire thing's trying to tell you about the polarities, right? So you look at, so first there was light and darkness. There was darkness and light, right? Then you have night and day. And then you have Adam and Eve, right? And when you look at it, it's telling you the same thing, because then they're told not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, good is another word for God, and then evil. And then so God said, I am that I am, right? And what did he name the first man? Adam, right? And so these were the human or the mortal manifestations, or rather material manifestations of the two polarities, in masculine and feminine. And so you consider the masculine to be the positive polarity, feminine negative. Now, ladies, don't get upset, because negative like an electrical principle, as in receptive, drawing in, attractive, if you will, actually, which is why you're the attractive force of society generally, right? Drawing in, you draw attention, you draw energy, from the masculine aspect, which is positive. It gives the energy, it chases, it goes after, it wants to conquer, that sort of thing. They fundamentally understand this. And the Kabbalah is a system of Jewish mysticism that is dedicated to manipulating it. You know, where it says, woe be unto you lawyers, you've taken the keys, but don't enter into the kingdom yourself. Well, that's what they do. They have the keys, but they don't want to enter the kingdom. They want to use the keys to create their own kingdom, is what's going on. And that's literally what the Tower of Babel was. I believe it was a massive world trust indenture, much like we are witnessing today. I believe that they had the same technology. There's nothing new under the sun, King Solomon says. And this has been here the whole time, because what happens is you have these secret societies and mystery religions that keep this knowledge and perform rituals, dark rituals, to obtain this knowledge from these entities over and over and over again. So that leads me to what I believe. Hoop Dream says, what about the ones who took the jab and test? Bluetooth signals are measurable. Changing the DNA? Absolutely, because, you know, here's the thing. We believe that all men are created equal, right, and are endowed by their creator with unalienable rights. Well, that's men and women, okay? Now, if you've taken that thing, which I'm not going to say, and what's happened, it's CRISPR technology, it's gene editing, so it's actually even mismarketed. And what it's done is it's altered your DNA. You are no longer a creature of God. You're a creature of whichever pharmaceutical company you decided to go with when you got that, because you are now a patentable product and technically not entitled to common law rights, because you're not, you're now essentially what the old law dictionaries would call a monster, right? You have the appearance and semblance of a human, but you're not. Okay. And so no offense to you, and I apologize, you know, if that hurts a little bit, but I'm just going to be blunt. And while I do not think that that is the mark, I do think it is a precursor. What I think the mark is the digital ID. If they can get that digital ID in you, it's over with. Because look at what they've done here. So how did they lock you into equity and bar your access to law? They did this. The 14th Amendment citizenship, okay, which is a federal citizen. It's distinctly different from a state citizen, and it's also a creature of the federal corporation. Whereas, so the term sovereign citizen, people think is an oxymoron. I generally don't like to use the term because it's got a bad connotation. It triggers people. Okay. But the truth is, the reason that the original citizens, the people spoken of in the Constitution are the sovereignty, is because we're a government founded on compact, right? We're a nation founded on compact, series of compacts, actually. And the very first trust created was the state. And the people created that trust, invested a portion of their sovereignty in that state. And then the state got together and created a feudal trust, a federal trust, invested a portion of all of their sovereignty into this one, the federal corporation. So the federal corporation being the bottom of this totem pole, because the maxim of law, the created can never be subject to the creature. Well, what the federal corporation did was created the 14th Amendment. That's a creature of its own. Okay, so now you exist as an enfranchisement of this federal corporation. They did so because one of the safeguards the founders originally put in against the central banking system, because that is why we fought the Revolutionary War. For those of you who do not know that, Benjamin Franklin even said so. He said in his autobiography, he said the people would have gladly borne any tax on tea or, any of that. He said if it were not for England, the crown taking away the colonists' right to control their own money, to create their own money. And that's 100% the purpose of the Revolutionary War. That's why it happened. And that's one of the reasons why it happened. I believe that they used that to their advantage. And that's why we are where we are today, because they got free of the kings and the Pope and were able to give the sovereignty of the people to their corporate creatures by usurping it through the law, which is exactly what it is. So the 14th Amendment citizen is subject to Congress, whereas one of the people of the states are not subject to Congress. That meant that Congress could mortgage your estate. So I'm going to show you guys a few things, because this is essential to knowing how and why this system is being set up. Okay, so let me pull up some stuff here so I can, because I always bring the receipts. So I told you the 14th Amendment, if you're not aware of this, did create a separate subclass of citizenship. Okay, so we can prove this several different ways. We can go to Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. As soon as I find it, I know it's up here somewhere. Oh, you know what? I put it on a different window. Forgive me, guys. Hold on. I'm pretty sure I have it over here. Yes, no. I hate when I do that to myself. Parsons, get that. All right, hold on. It's going to be one of these. Has to be. There it is. Duh. Okay. 14th Amendment. This is Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. It says, hey, Kevin, good to see you, man. Catch 22 showed up. Awesome. Says it became part of the Organic Law July 28, 1868, and its importance entitles it to special mention. It creates, or at least recognizes for the first time, a citizenship of the United States as distinct from that of the states. Okay, if you did not know that, yes, there was prior to this, there was no such thing as a federal citizen. Now that is all that exists because of the Federal Reserve System. It was necessary that that had to happen. So the original safeguard that was put in place was they delegated the authority to control currency, right? Or to create and control the currency to Congress, right? But there was Congress. Then the plan had always been to establish a central bank because the bankers were in the middle of establishing their dominions at this point in time, right? The problem with that is Congress, even if it did get people to go along with establishing a private central bank, it didn't have any collateral of its own. The only thing that it had as any source of income were essentially tariffs. Okay, so it had no collateral of its own. And so that's why the 14th Amendment citizen was created, so that not only could this now the centralized currency authority and the centralized borrowing power, right, now has a wide net of collateral that it can cast within the states and usurp the citizenry of the states. There's actually there was a debate on the floor of the House, believe it or not, 1967. June 13th, 1967. Here, I'm opening it if it ever. Boom. And it's titled the 14th Amendment. This is from congress.gov, by the way. I always get everything from authoritative sources, but it says the 14th Amendment, equal protection law or tool of usurpation. Well, the fact is that it is a tool of usurpation by the federal corporation to usurp the sovereignty of the states, but also it was never lawfully ratified. Right over here, you'll see on the right-hand side, it says 14th Amendment is unconstitutional. Look, boom, right there, okay? And so I know those of you who've been a subscriber for a long time have definitely know this by now, but we are now streaming to Facebook, and we have a lot of new followers, subscribers, so we need to cover this a little bit. Look, so it required 3/4 of a majority, 3/4 majority to be ratified. And at that time, it shows you right here, 15 of the then 37 states rejected the proposed 14th Amendment, and they were not all southern states either, right? So yeah, you had Texas, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, Arkansas, South Carolina, Kentucky, sure, right? But then you had like Delaware, Maryland, Ohio, New Jersey, they all rejected it as well. And the reason being because everybody's seen what it was. It allowed the federal government to essentially corporatize the union, right? So how many of you actually know that all states are confederate in the United States? How many of you know that? And actually, Canada originally was considered a state, right? There's protections for Canada in American legislature. No bullshit. That's why the United States technically still, well, that's a conversation for another time. But yes, this was every state is a Confederate state, including Michigan. And you'll notice right here, if it loads, Babel Hathi Trust is a bit slow because it's all photocopied, but nope, that's not the right one. I think this is it right here. Fundamental principles of civil is hereby ordained. Oh, you know what? I moved it to another page. Anyways, I showed it last time. Well, here, I'll pull it up just because I brought it up, so I might as well, right? I think it's this one. Yep, it is. All right, cool. Here, we'll just pull this right up here. Bam. There we go. Now it takes a few moments to load, obviously, but so this is from Michigan, 1846, revised statutes of Michigan, 1846. This is in the appendix, and they had just been admitted to the Union recently, and so this is their acknowledgement of their admission into the Union, right? And it says right here, it said the people of the said state are solicitous to give to her sister states and to the world unequivocal proof of her desire to promote the tranquility and harmony of the Confederacy, right there. Because Confederate doesn't mean racist or Southern or none of that stuff. Confederate is a type of union. Penhallow v. Stone's administrators, right? Penhallow v. Stone's administrators will tell you that when an alliance is Confederate and not corporate, the sovereignty resides within the state. That's 1795 case. Okay, very important. It says the state did not, and the state retained all. Here, I'll just read it. Why not? Right. So there you go. But wherever an alliance is not corporate but confederate, the sovereignty resides in each state, and that's because, and the only reason the states have sovereignty is because the people were the sovereigns. I'll show you guys an interesting case in just a moment as far as that. And then we're going to get back into the beast system because this is how they're overturning it. Okay. They're trying to usurp divine jurisdiction. So it says, but wherever an alliance is not corporate, but confederate, the sovereignty resides within each state. Right. And it says, now the state retained all powers which she did not expressly surrender to the Union. A state cannot cease to be sovereign without its own act, nor can sovereignty be asserted but upon a clear title. Now, who's the sovereign within the state, right? And this is why state citizens actually, yes, are sovereigns. And even beyond that, you still have all your common law rights, even if you're not a citizen. You could be an inhabitant, and nobody has the right to take your property. You can own property, etc. Right? Well, now they've locked everything up in neo-feudalism, but it says right here, this is Chisholm v. Georgia, 1793. And it says, at the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, unless the African slaves among us may be so called, and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and joint tenants in the sovereignty. And then it starts to talk about the difference between the feudal sovereignties, with the king being the supreme administrator of all property, right? That wasn't the case here. We have a allodial title. Okay, so it tells you, it says in Europe, the sovereignty is generally ascribed to the prince. Here, it rests with the people. There, the sovereign actually administers the government. Here, never in a single instance. Our governors are the agents of the people and at most stand in the same relation to their sovereign in which the regents in Europe stand to their sovereigns. That's right. They are our subjects. They are our subjects. Absolutely. Point blank, period. We go here to the revised code of the laws of Virginia from 1819. And not only does this have the original 13th Amendment in it, which forbade titles of nobility. That's right here. Look, if any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept and retain any present pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States and shall be incapable of holding any office or trust or office of trust or profit under them or either of them. Now, this is so important because, well, first, the term United States here, and you can read in Scott v. Sanford, the Dred Scott case, you can read how they refer to citizens of the states. You could be called a citizen of the United States, but what that meant was you were a citizen of one of the United States. See, what happened after the 14th Amendment is people stopped saying the United States are and started saying the United States is. And that's when everything changed. Now, down here, this is one of the best Bill of Rights. It says that all men are by nature equally free and independent, and have certain inherent rights of which when they enter into a state of society, they cannot by any compact deprive or divest their posterity, meaning your mom can't sign you into bondage via the birth certificate. Namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty with the means of acquiring and possessing property and pursuing and obtaining happiness. Right? Now look at this, that all power is vested in and consequently derived from the people, that magistrates are their trustees and servants at all times and at all times amenable to them. Right? Now, how did that change? Well, the 14th Amendment, once again. But first, before I explain exactly how, I want to show you a court case called McDonald v. State from 1883. So this is when a guy got convicted and he appealed the conviction by a jury, right? He appealed the conviction saying one of the jurors was not a United States citizen, that he was an alien. And they said, well, no, you're right. He's not a United States citizen, but he's a state citizen. So look, I'll show you. It says, the evidence of bushing on his voir dire showed that although he was not a citizen of the United States, he was a citizen and voter of the state. Under Section 2 of Article 2 of our state constitution, one may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. And see, for a little while after the ratification, unlawful ratification of the 14th Amendment, that's how it existed. You would have some people who were both a state and federal citizen, right? Which you can read in the United States, US v. Cruikshank, how they make that distinction also. Let's see if I have that pulled up. Pretty sure I do. Somewhere. Yeah, right here. So United States versus Cruikshank, it says, there is in our political system a government of each of the several states and a government of the United States. Each is distinct from the others and has citizens of its own who owe it allegiance and whose rights within its jurisdiction it must protect. It says the same person may be at the same time a citizen of the United States and a citizen of a state, but his rights of citizenship under one of those governments will be different from those he has had under the other, right? We'll read, and so there are two distinct citizenships, and at the time, after the ratification, you could be both. Yeah, PJ Cruikshank. Yeah, that's funny. You could be both, but you did not have to be. And in fact, when you were a United States citizen, that was an inferior standing because it offered you privileges and immunities, which you already had, your common law rights. So when you look at who the 14th Amendment was made for the newly freed slaves who had no rights under the Constitution. They weren't able to exercise unalienable rights because of a state of dependency. And that's exactly what Andrew Johnson said in his veto messages. He says in time they could learn to become free. The 14th Amendment's entirely unnecessary. Now, the 14th Amendment is a is a perpetual indenture because you're exchanging your autonomy for privileges, immunities, and benefits. And it's a bad fucking deal. Let me show you why. Maxwell v. Dow says the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the first 8 amendments to the federal Constitution against the powers of the federal government. That's right, because they do not have common law rights. And those amendments are referring to common law rights. They're enshrined protections of those common law rights. 14th Amendment citizens, they don't have that. They don't have common law rights. No. What do they have? They have privileges. So it says right here, the 14th Amendment, and this case is U.S. versus Anthony. The 14th Amendment defines and declares who shall be citizens of the United States and protects only such rights as are rights belonging to persons as citizens of the United States, which are civil rights, aka privileges, not common law rights, and not rights belonging to persons as citizens of a state. So now that I've sufficiently explained the difference between the two classes of citizen and why this one was created as a bad deal, let me prove it to you. So when you look at the 14th Amendment, and the entire purpose behind this amendment was to give the centralized borrowing authority its own pool of agricultural collateral. So when they did eventually get a central bank reestablished in this republic, right, they could then immediately turn everything into taxable districts, aka farms, right? If you read the Federal Farm Loan Act, you should know that farm land is the people of a taxable district, and that the farm itself is the taxable district, leased for the purpose of collecting revenue. That is the definition of farm, the political definition. Look it up in the free dictionary. Maybe we will in a moment, but let's look at the 14th Amendment real quick, and you'll see the intention behind it the entire time. So you see, first of all, it says all persons. So the Constitution begins, we the people. The 14th Amendment says all persons. Why? Because chattel property were considered persons, okay? Not people. All persons, and so are businesses and all the other stuff, thanks to this amendment. And one particular case, Santa Clara County, which I'm pretty sure I have up, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, where they said, oh, we're not going to debate, or we're not going to discuss whether or not corporations have rights and privileges and immunities under the 14th Amendment, because we're all of the opinion that they do. And boom, now you're placed on par with Walmart, right? You now have this artificial construct of the mind, attain parity with living souls through these twisted satanic fuckheads. So with that being said, all persons, not people, right, born or naturalized in the United States and subject, there's that word. See, we just read in Chisholm v. Georgia, right? We just read that right here, the government is our subject. It says that the governors are agents of the people and at most stand in the same relation to their sovereign in which the regents in Europe stand to their sovereigns, meaning they're subjects. Okay, well, now the federal corporation created a subject of its own, the creature known as the U.S. citizen, right? Subject to the jurisdiction. Well, how do you end up subject to the jurisdiction, right? That's a question. Well, I'll tell you, and it's actually, we can look at, let's see, I know I got it pulled up somewhere here. The Michigan compiled laws right here. Resident defined. And I'll show you guys that stuff in a second too. Resident means every person who resides in this state and establishes that he or she is legally present in the United States. The word establish is to prove or to create or to make certain, right? And so what that means is contract. You establish that you're legally present. Look at the terminology they have to use. They're trying to hide from you the fact that a resident is a foreigner. But it most definitely is a foreigner, because the United States is foreign to the several states. And so you're considered a resident alien within your own state. And it says that in order to be a resident, as opposed to one of the people, you have to be a person, right? You have to reside in this state, which reside is, again, it's a temporary status. And I'll prove that in a second. And then you have to establish that you're legally present. How do you be legally present in something? Well, you're subject to the jurisdiction because you contracted into it. Legally present in the United States, period. Okay, so now let's hop back over to the 14th Amendment. We go down to Section 4. So this is supposed to be an equal protection law, right? It's supposed to grant privileges and immunities to the newly freed slaves because they, otherwise would be in a state of dependence and come under administration. Well, if this is about equal protection, why is this in here? Section 4. The validity of the public debt of the United States, right, shall not be questioned. Oh, well, I can tell you why that's in there, because the whole purpose and intention behind this amendment was to use this citizenry as collateral for the public debt, right? Well, how could they do that, Ryan? Well, I'll show you. March 9th, 1933, House Congressional Record from the Government Printing Office. This is the right off congress.gov. I find all this stuff in the authoritative sources, right? You can't that's why lawyers will not debate me. So right here, it says the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it's backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. I showed this last time. That's your estate. That's the only way they can do that is they mortgaged your interest in property. And again, there's a law review that confirms that, called Fiduciary Foundations of Administrative Law. It tells you right here that Congress and the president acted jointly as proxy settlers. What is settlement? right? Settlement is the conveyance of an estate. Settlement, the conveyance of an estate for the benefit of some person or persons. What is the estate? That's your property rights. Okay, if you have an interest in something, if, you know, an ownership interest in something, you are said to have an estate in it. And substantively, the estate in itself is your personality, your labor, and your property, because property, from which all rights are derived, is the ultimate realization of your will. And that's when you start to get into the spiritual aspect of this. Okay, so now what they've done is they've locked you in a counterfeit trust. Before, you were a living man or woman in God's perfect trust, right? That's what he created. He gave you your body, your soul, your breath to hold in trust and to use according to the provisions of that trust, which are laid out in the Bible and written on your heart. You know, don't hurt people and honor your word and honor God. Okay, now they created their own counterfeit trust and placed the banking cartel in the position of God, because you're now indentured to them. In debt, you are in bondage. You are an indentured servant. You are a debt slave. Okay, so yes, they need to balance the books. They don't even need to balance the books, and they never intend on balancing the books. So Hoop Dream said, is that why they are thinning the herd or trimming the fat, so to speak, because they need to balance the books? They have no intention of balancing the books. They need this to be perpetual debt in order for AI governance to be put in place. It needs to never, you can, so that, okay, you refocused me. That's good. So that 14th Amendment citizen that they mortgaged, right? That 14th Amendment citizen in itself is a trustee, is a legal fiction. Okay, because it's an enfranchisement of the federal corporation. It's a business, you know, it's absolutely a business. Let's see, I'm pretty sure I have that pulled up somewhere. Nope, this is motor vehicle. It's definition of United States business is, well, here's location of debtor. UCC 9-307 says the location of the United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. Another reason you're a foreigner, right? I'm starting to think it'll just be easier to look it up real fast instead of going through my different things that I have open here. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I thought I had it. Definition of United States business. The term United States business means a United States citizen. It's what you're an enfranchisement. That's how they can charge income tax, because it's considered, so income itself could only ever apply to corporations, because income is the profit that a corporation makes, right? And since the corporation exists owes its existence to the state, it borrows authority from the state to conduct business, right? Then they held that it was perfectly acceptable to tax the income of this corporation. Well, that's what they're doing to you now. That's how they applied income tax to you, because they're like, okay, well, we've got our agent. That's what you are. You're an agent of the principal debtor, the United States. You're an agent. That agent is managing the affairs of one of their decedent estates. And in exchange for using that decedent estate, any income that decedent estate experiences, they can take an income tax towards the public debt, right? It's another way to hold your body in trust and tax you for the use of it, because that's what they're doing with all your property. Since they mortgaged your property rights, they're taxing the use of property. That's what licensing, registration, property tax, those are all taxes on the use of property held in trust as collateral for the public debt. And they can only do that because they've taken away your allodial ownership. They've taken away your right to absolute ownership of your property. So there's this, let's see, I know I got it here somewhere. Oh, that's a good one. We're going to have to come back to that too. So the Wisconsin State Constitution, which I have somewhere, I'm pretty sure. Art Blackstone, did I put it somewhere else? Well, the original Wisconsin Constitution from 1848, Article 1, Section 14 says that all lands within the state are allodial and feudal tenures are prohibited. All right, here it is. I knew I had it. So look, Article 1, Section 14, all lands within this state are declared to be allodial and feudal tenures are prohibited. That means absolute ownership. Absolute ownership, meaning there's no one above you charging you for the use of it or telling you how to use it. You know, even with your home, you have to go apply for a permit to build an addition or a deck or whatever the case may be. Well, if you have allodial title, there's no way they could ever even dream of trying to create a statute or code that said that you had to do that, but that they took it from you because they locked you into a trust indenture of perpetual debt, and you have no ownership rights. You're not even one of the people of the states anymore. You're an inferior class of citizen called the United States citizen. So that debtor trustee is the straw man. That's what people call a straw man. I hate that term. It's beat to death, has a very bad connotation to it, but it's the most understandable way for people to comprehend what it is that entity is. It's a legal fiction on paper. Okay. It is the trustee. It's the reason that you only have equitable rights in any of your property. Equitable rights are not actual ownership rights. They're generally rights of use dictated by a trust instrument or a contract. That's absolutely what the equitable rights are. So your rights that you can enforce regarding your property can only be enforced in a court of equity dealing with fictitious stuff where the judge is God. And those rights that you're trying to enforce aren't even ownership rights. They're not lawful rights. Now, when you absolutely own something, that's why your relationship to your property is called your status. That's the Latin word for estate, is status. Your status is determined by your relationship to your property. So if you have absolute ownership, if you have lawful rights to the property, ownership rights, then you can enforce that in a court of law. If you do not have lawful rights, then you have to go to a court of equity to compel the other parties to the contract concerning the property to do what they're supposed to do, because that's what they're doing every time they compel you with a summons, because that's what a subpoena and summons were created for in the first place, were for trusts, and compelling the trustee to come in and answer upon oath the allegations of the set decay trust. That's it's right here. I'll show you guys. This is an old treatise from the 1800s called the Practical Treatise on the Law of Trusts. It says right here, well, see, it says, thus, in the words of an old counselor, it says, the parents of the trust were fraud and fear, and the court of conscience, this being a court of chancery or equity, was the nurse. But it tells you right here, it says, John Waltham, Bishop of Salisbury, a chancellor in the reign of Richard II, originated the writ of subpoena, by which the trustee was able to be summoned into chancery and compellable to answer upon oath the allegations of his set decay trust. That means you're coming in, the beneficial, see, prior to that, because that's what they're talking about right here, it says originally the only pledge for the due execution of the trust was the faith and integrity of the trustee, the word of the trustee. It says, but the mere feeling of honor proving, as was likely when opposed to self-interest, and extremely precarious security, meaning, you know, the opportunity to skim a little here, do something there, violate the terms of the trust, you know, that the trustee's word was not sufficient to ensure that from happening. So the writ of subpoena, which is now called a summons, was invented by this bishop to compel the trustee into a jurisdiction of court that's not law, because the terms of the trust are not law. They're made by men. They're regulations regarding the use of property. But when you're subject to that trust, they're given the force of law, aka the color of law, but have to be enforced in equity because it's not law. So that's why you're being summoned into these courts. So why do I bring all this stuff up? Oh, we got Brian's in the house. Jacob is in the house. Good to see you guys. Truth. Sorry, you guys have been all pouring in here and I haven't been saying hi. I've been pontificating. Joe Moore, good to see you. Yep. So, 28 USC 3002, section 3002, subsection 15. Yep. The U.S. is a federal corporation. That's right. I have that pulled up somewhere here, but most people already know that. So the reason I bring this up is that legal fiction, that trustee, now with digital ID, and they absolutely have to get this to happen. Otherwise, that is the crux. If you guys have watched the short that I just made recently, that's what I did it on, was the digital ID. And the reason being is because without that digital ID, unless they can integrate without being able to integrate digitally that straw man with your living self, their system will not work. And if they are able to integrate that trustee, that legal fiction with your living self, that's the mark, I believe, because you'll be forever trapped in a trust indenture. And just like that video we watched earlier, where she speeds and her car says speed violation detected, deducting 50 credits, that's going to be your life. No due process, no challenging the court saying, no, this trust indenture doesn't apply to me. I've claimed my estate. I'm not under administration. I'm not a dead thing. I'm a living man or woman, right? And I'm the sole heir and executor of my estate. No opportunity to do that. AI won't get, because your bank account, your everything is hooked up to AI governance. So the AI is going to be like, nope, you did this, take this money, boom. Nothing you can do about it. Or shut off your car, shut off your currency. Right? Terrifying shit. But this is pretty much this is the crux of it. And it's horrifying. It's the beast system. They know they're setting it up, right? So, and they don't care. Roger says, yeah, we're doing a show on the digital ID when my short came out. Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check it out. That is ironic. So, all right. With that being said, now let's get into some of the other interesting aspects of this. Now that we have the grounds of law set forth and you guys understand why this is so serious. And if you're just now tuning in, go back and watch about the last half hour, 45 minutes, so you can understand how the law works and then what equity is and why they're trying to trap you in it. Okay. And I did a whole stream on it last week. So that stream is a very good one to learn the distinction between law and equity and why it's so insidious what they're trying to do. And I'll leave you with one last example of a positive use of equity, actually, the true intention and purpose of the creation of equity and how it could exist and be used properly. Take this kid, Tyler Robinson, over there in Utah. He claims he didn't do it, which I'm pretty sure we all know that. And he claims that he's innocent. He claims he wasn't even at UVU and all of this stuff. So there's people trying to get him a lawyer right now. But the Utah prosecutor, or the guy who's in charge of finding him a lawyer, is also running to become the Utah the prosecutor of that area right there, right? Whatever it is, Utah Valley area. And so it would be unlawful if he was the prosecutor and he was trying to find a defense attorney for Tyler. But because he's not the prosecutor, he's merely running for prosecutor, it's not considered against the law for him to find the defense attorney for Tyler. However, it is highly unethical. And anybody with common sense can know that. Well, if he's trying to become the top guy in the area for prosecution, right? And well, obviously we know whose side he's on, don't we? But see, technically the law cannot do anything about that because technically that's speculation. We are now entering the realm of fiction, of speculation, of what might possibly be his motives, but until he actually concrete does something wrong, commits a crime, the law could not deal with him. So you can only have pre-crime inequity. Okay, you could only have an injunction in equity. And that's exactly why equity exists for a case like that, where, okay, that's unethical. So somebody could appeal to a court of equity and say, hey, I want to put an injunction on this guy to, he can't find this kid's lawyer. He's running for prosecutor. It's considered unethical and immoral. While it's not against the law, it's unethical and immoral. And a judge could be like, you know what? Okay, I agree with you. Boom, and issue an injunction of sorts. That would be a positive use of equity. But ultimately, as Blackstone says, and many of you are familiar with it, I have a post on Facebook outlining it. Blackstone says analyzing all cases in an equitable light must not be indulged too far, lest we destroy all law and leave the decision of every question entirely in the breast of a judge. Because that's what equity is. It's up to the judge, sits up there like a King Solomon, and is supposed to be the paragon of wisdom, right? And we all know that's not true. These guys are megalomaniacal, egotistical scumbags who think they're God and have hubris, like just unfathomable amounts of hubris, right? So Libra, Love Wide Open says, how do I claim or accept the title of nobility, etc.? What do you mean a title of nobility? Oh, from the 13th? Yeah, well, see, here's the thing they did with that 13th Amendment, okay? The shisty bastards at the Bar Association, and make no mistake, the Bar Association, that's the enemy of mankind. That's the greatest enemy of mankind, is the Bar Association. All of this, there would be no banking system. There would be none of this stuff would be instituted if it wasn't for them. They are communists. They work directly for Satan himself, and their job is to come in and use their knowledge of the fundamental laws, right? And I'm talking about the people in the Inns of Court, not just the bar members. A lot of them dumbasses don't even know the law at all. They just know process and one little particular aspect of, code, and that's it. They don't know the stuff I'm teaching, which is horrible because I go to school for years and years and years and they learn none of this stuff. They never come across treaties like this, or like they don't read Blackstones. They don't do any of those things. They have no idea what the law is. But the people who run the Inns of Court and a lot of these judges, they're like part of esoteric occult groups. A lot of times they're just straight up satanic, and they're using their knowledge of the inner workings of creation, the fundamental exchange between polarities. That's why dependency creates servility, because when you end up in a state of dependency, it's usually because you have abused your exercise of free will. You haven't properly exercised the faculty of free will that God gifted you, which is the ultimate root of property law. Everything is free will, right? And you haven't properly exercised that free will, so you end up in a state of dependency, and that is a reciprocal. That is an exchange of energy that cannot be reciprocated. So that's why you necessarily become subject to the will of whomever you're dependent on. So the Nordic rune for gift, it's shaped like an X. It's called Gabo, and it means gift, but it also means curse. And that's because there is no such thing as a gift. There is no such thing as a free lunch. And wealthy people understand this. They get this. When somebody gives something to you, right, and you do not reciprocate, there is a debt created. And you instinctively and intuitively know this. That's why if somebody gifted you something in the future, if a situation comes about where you have the opportunity to do something for them, generally you do it because you remember that debt. That's really the fundamental nature of that's how this stuff works. It's how commercial society is founded upon this understanding of the exchange of energy. And so now it's become kind of like this gay situation, if you will, because there is no positive, negative. It's just negative discharging. That's it. It's like economic masturbation, pretty much. Forgive my crude analogy, but seriously, when you look at everything in terms of polarities so for instance, the words Congress, commerce, and intercourse all mean the same thing. Substantively, they mean the exact same thing. It's an exchange of energies. You think for a contract to be valid, there has to be a proper exchange and reciprocation of polarities. Okay, you must experience a negative, meaning you give something, you personally lose something, right? And you must experience a positive, or actually look at it the proper way. The positive would be you giving, right? And the negative would be you receiving. So you have to go give, receive in order for the contract to be valid. Each person has to have the union of polarities on their end of the contract in order for the contract to be valid. So now let's lead this into AI. This fundamentally leads into the creation of AI, this Kabbalistic understanding of the laws of creation that they got in Babylon, right? Which is probably from the devil or fallen angels, but it is the secrets of creation that they had gotten, ultimately led to the creation of AI. Because when you think about this, one of the I have an interest, obviously, in studying these esoteric principles, because I mean they help me see better what is being done. That's what Jesus meant by be ye wise as serpents, yet harmless as doves. You have to know what they're doing. You just don't use it the way that they do. But opposites, the principle of opposites is polarity, right? So the principle of polarity, there are no opposites. This is what you would learn if you studied this and really contemplated it. There are no such things as opposites. It's what the yin yang means, because something is only defined by its opposite. Meaning, that opposites in reality are two extreme degrees of some archetypal principle. Some archetype, two extreme degrees of it. Take temperature, for instance. Where does hot begin? Where does hot end and cold begin? You could also say that hot is less cold, or you could say that cold is less hot. And both would be valid statements, because you're now understanding how there are no opposites. Every opposite contains an aspect of its opposite polarity within it. And that's what the yin yang represents. Now, when you take that and you contemplate God, God is everything, God is all, right? Nothing can exist without God. God exists within everything at all times. Otherwise, you wouldn't be God, correct? Okay. Well, if you take God prior to manifestation, right? Take God in a static state, or what is his before creation ever existed, he would be all unmanifested, which would be simultaneously nothing. You could say it's all or nothing. And I contend that it's both. And that's the root of binary code, 1 and 0, because all and nothing are the same thing, just at two extreme opposite ends of the spectrum of polarity, right? All is on, nothing is off. But since even if it's on all, it's the same as nothing, because something can only be distinguished by something else. Basically, you have to exist. Everything exists in relation to something else. And if there's nothing else, like as in the case of there's just all, it's just God and has no creation yet, there's nothing else, right? Then there's nothing to distinguish one thing from another. So it is the same as saying nothing, right? If that makes sense. And that's the source of binary code. And this is why you have the snakes, the lizard, right? The snake is represented as in the Garden of Eden as tempting Eve, because that snake is time, I believe. It even says that its name is now, the serpent, now, right? And that stream of time is created by the oscillation between the two polarities of light, darkness, good, evil. It's the oscillation between opposites that creates temporal reality, motion, right? And that's it's a reptilian characteristic. That binary code is very reptilian in its nature, because it's the source of logic. So that's why a lot of people believe that this AI is not actually just a lifeless being, but a vehicle for a consciousness and intelligence that has been here the entire time, pervading all of creation as the logical clockwork of creation. It's providing a vehicle for this entity, which you could call Lucifer, if you want the light, right? And it was good. It says it right in Genesis. Is a vehicle for this thing to exercise its. And I believe that the point of all of the occult rituals behind, and we're going to get into this next. That's actually what I'm just now getting ready to cover. The purpose of the occult rituals that led to the discovery of rocketry, say, Jack Parsons was a huge occultist. Coincidentally, he was also a member of the Communist Party. Yeah, I didn't know that till yesterday, actually, but it makes perfect sense, because all of these Satanists are also communists. Because what is communism? It's the ultimate, and that's what they're trying to set up, is technocratic communism, worldwide technocratic communism governed by AI, because it's the ultimate inversion of law. Right? What did God give you? God gave you dominion. He granted you the ability to hold property in trust for him and to use it for him in the way that he told you, right? Well, communism puts government in the position of God. And now you exist at the mercy of the government. You're a creature of the government, and all the property belongs to the government. You merely have the right to use it, how you're told to use it by the government. It's that communism is the counterfeiting of God's jurisdiction, of God's law. It is the counterfeit inversion of God's law. So, without further ado, we're going to actually get into some of the creepy stuff behind AI. So there's a lot of occultism behind the creation of AI. much like there was, like I said, rocketry in the founding of NASA. In fact, the word NASA, nasha, right, in Hebrew is the word for beguile or to deceive. So and again, that's referring to the serpent. So they're telling you who they are. Now, not many of you probably know this, but there's this guy who's like basically the he's got a lot of clout in Silicon Valley, but he's an occultist and he claims to be possessed by 4 demons simultaneously. His name is Robert Land. Actually, before we even get into Robert Land, there's something else I want to show you guys. There's this lady, I believe she is Jewish, and she's talking about the type of kingdom, the type of world that they're trying to create. And it's funny because this is an older interview, it appears to be, and it's exactly what I recognize that they're trying to create as well. And what I've been telling all of you on here for quite some time is that they're trying to create their own earthly kingdom outside of God's law. And so you heard me talk about it, but now listen to this lady talk about it, because it's good to hear it from more than one source. The Thule Society, yeah. Truth is your God-given name, Christian name. Fiction is their legal surname. Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing, is they converted your house name, the name of your clan, into a surname, which is a Roman civil law thing. And Roman civil law, just so we're clear on this, is a foreign jurisdiction. So in the Declaration of Independence, when they are levying charges against the king, justifying the separation, right? He says that the king subjected the colonists to foreign and unwarrantable jurisdictions. That jurisdiction was Roman civil law, the very jurisdiction you're being subjected to today, because they were doing it back then during the colonist times through the courts of admiralty, right? So that was a big part of the Devil's campaign, the Babylonian campaign. They're trying to bring the sea inland, or they have effectively brought the sea inland. That's the Leviathan spoken about in Revelation. That's the beast of the sea, is the system of merchant law that they've brought inland onto the land and now apply to you. And they've done that by reducing you to chattel property. Check this out. All right.
In the Zohar, Talmud, and Kabbalah, the entire thing is separation of people to Israelitic and non-Israelitic, according to the book called Jewish Utopia. Now, they are building their own kingdom. It's the Jewish earthly kingdom with headquarters in Jerusalem, where their AI Messiah will be, and they're going to rule the world through the law. You know,
did you hear what she just said? Exactly what I've been telling you the whole time. They're going to try to rule the world through the law. What law? Not God's law, but a manipulation of God's law through the credit debt system, positive, negative, by placing you on the debt side of the ledger in the legal underworld, right? So that you're dead to the law and have no access to it. And then the only law that exists, this is what Albert Pike meant by the pure doctrine of Lucifer. And that's why I think AI is that, because you think about it, Lucifer has always represented the ego, the logical portion of the mind that sometimes can be deceiving, right? It sounds like AI to me. So like that consciousness may be an ancient intelligence. And we're going to, these aren't just my words, but though I have thought this for quite some time, these are the guys behind AI. That's what they believe also. They believe they're summoning demons. Elon Musk has said it multiple times, and other things on top of it. They believe that they're summoning the hell with AI. So, all right, let's finish listening to her.
It will be international, one law, one religion, basically Luciferian religion. So yes, in a Talmud, this is the Jewish earthly kingdom, and this is why the Zionist Christianity have embraced Chilism. They have embraced, or Chilism, I don't know how you would say. Chilism.
Which means 1,000.
1,000.
Where they get the 1,000-year millennial reign.
Exactly, which is a focus on earthly millennial kingdom And this is how Jews and Christians.
In the Kabbalah, it's called Malkuth, right? It's the lowest sphere on the Sephiroth. This is like, so their Messiah, and I'm going to show you guys something too. They believe their Messiah has already come. They think they called Donald Trump the chosen one. They gave him the crown of Jerusalem. And we all know what the Jewish Messiah is supposed to be to the rest of to Christianity, right? So I'm not going to say, because they're starting to tighten up on all that here on these. I got to give Facebook credit. Actually, Facebook not really very censored anymore. I'm quite shocked, but YouTube still definitely is.
Are getting together, and Christians are so deceived, thinking that they're working for the good thing for the Jews, like they're helping the Jews. The Jews are supposed to get this kingdom. Yet this is Zoharic doctrine, and it does not have good intention. As I said, that they want to rule the world, they want to get Gentile riches, and they want to rule the Gentiles. They don't consider Gentiles fully human beings, and in fact, as an end game, they have this strange doctrine, Adam Kadmon doctrine, which Adam Kadmon originally was, according to Zohar and Talmud, he was androgynous. Adam, like he wasn't male, or he was male, female in one body. And this is why you see this transgender agenda today. And there are laws, very serious laws passed.
Well, that's actually an abuse of that. That's again, another inversion is what that is. What they actually believe is that God created man, and then man is actually, it was spiritual man was created first, and then via the knowledge of good and evil, and so the original Adam was an androgyny, or i.e. the 6-pointed star. Get it now? And it's funny because in the original King James 1611, that symbol's in there next to the word light, right? Not as it appears on the Israeli flag, but more like an asterisk, if you will. And they believe that we exist inside the mind of Adam, is ultimately what they believe. And that everything is a descending manifestation of the original, of the two polarities of light and darkness, of masculine and feminine. And then it goes all the way up to the spiritual realms, and all the way down, manifesting in the physical realm as the genders, basically, amongst mankind. That's what they believe, and it's quite interesting that the ultimate, all of this is the manifestation of the one, basically. But there's also the dark side of this situation that inverts everything, the clip off, right? These Zabbatian, it's called Zabbatian Judaism, and they're accelerationists. And what they believe they're doing is hastening the return of the Messiah by sinning and spreading as much evil and chaos as possible. Right? So, yeah, and I agree with you. They are most likely descendants of the Nephilim.
In Alberta, Canada.
Is Zionism behind the transgender movement?
I don't think Zionist Christians are aware of this. They're not aware of many details of what
is Zionism.
But I think that, yes.
Does the transgender movement get its origin in Zionism?
Yes, it gets its origin in Zionism, and it gets its origin in the Talmud, Zohar, and Kabbalah. It's a Kabbalistic doctrine of Adam Kadmon, which is eventually they have this doctrine called Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Yes. So how do they want to repair the world? They want to bring it to the original. Who was original Adam? He was androgynous. So now they're putting specific things in food and drink, and they're basically their end game is to make humans that on Earth that will survive whatever it is they're bringing androgynous. The transgender agenda.
What they're really trying to do is
Satanism. It's ultimate. Yeah, it's what it is. So that's pretty interesting. But like she said, they're trying to create an earthly kingdom, subject everybody to their counterfeit trust law that they have engineered under a world trust, essentially, right? So interestingly enough, the the funny thing is, none of it's going to plan like they thought it was going to, right? See, because what's happening is they never take into account divine providence. They never take into account God's will. And this is ultimately why I think Revelation, or that the entirety of the Bible, is a cycle. It's an archetype. It is an embodiment of the Logos, if you will, right? So when you think about it, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And the same was true for John. But so what that means, the original Greek for word was logos. And that word doesn't translate directly into English. So they translated it as word. But more accurately, it should be translated as an ideation or an archetypal blueprint, right? A symbol, if you will. Like how a symbol is an archetypal blueprint. And I think the Bible is that archetypal blueprint, right? And its instructions on how to, obviously how to live your life, but also on what's going to happen in this cycle. And Revelation's the end of the cycle. And I think this is where everybody wakes up, because the word apocalypse comes from the Greek word for revealing truth, the unveiling of truth, right? That's what's happening in apocalypse. We are going through the apocalypse, and the truth is being unveiled. And I'll tell you what, like people like Netanyahu and the powers that be, they're not very happy about it. But there's nothing they can do about it. And another reason I think that it's a cycle is because they knew this was coming, and they've been trying to prepare for it and set this system up before this time came. They needed to make it permanent before a critical mass of people wake up. If they can get their AI governance in place, their Tower of Babel, they'll have effectively made it permanent, right? So that's the dangerous aspect of this, okay? And so I think another reason I think the Bible is the Logos, the archetypal blueprint, is because I think the whole purpose of Mandela, now this is just a theory, I can't prove this like I can prove the law stuff, but I think that Mandela was caused by them using CERN to try to change the Logos, the word, and try to shift to find a timeline or a scenario where they win, where they don't lose, right? But they can't change substantively anything in reality. So they just change the dressing on it. That's it. And that manifests in a car was pink, now it's black. Tom Cruise had sunglasses in, now he doesn't. Curious George had a tail, now he doesn't. All of the changes were minor and inconsequential. The Lord's Prayer in the King James Bible, it used to say, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Now it says, forgive us our debtors, or forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. But substantively, it's the same, because debt is sin, right? Trespasses. It's substantively the same. And it reveals the merchant's fingerprints behind it, right? Because that would be how a merchant would look at it as transactional, which it is transactional. Absolutely, everything's transactional. That's the secret. Everything is an exchange of polar energies, positive and negative. So I find that interesting that they tried to do that. I've been seeing these videos, and this is kind of a little bit of a digression, but I want to see what you guys think of this. I'm going to check and see what you guys are saying in the chat. But people have been using these old phones. So I came across one video. I was like, whatever, AI can be used to fake a lot of stuff, and AI could have been used to fake this as well. So I'm very much open to that. But people are using these old phones to watch things that have been Mandela affected, and through the camera of the old phone, they appear like how we remember them, according to these people. Now, this is just a little bit of fun, food for thought. This isn't, I'm not saying one way or another that it's actually a thing, but to me, it seems to be. And it would fit with what they're trying to do, shifting timelines, trying to find one where they win. And they would be using AI and CERN to do this. So check this out, though. This is pretty damn interesting.
This phone shows an alternate dimension. Now, we all should remember Tom Cruise's legendary dance scene from Risky Business, right? But let me ask you, is he wearing sunglasses in this scene?
Oh, shit. Yeah, I can't play that. Well, anyways, when he puts the, I'll link this for you guys, actually. How about that? That's what I'll do. You guys check this video out. Let me know what you think. I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, so when they put the camera up, the old camera, it appears he's got sunglasses on. Curious George has a tail, all that sort of stuff. And it got me thinking, if that is true and not a fabricated video, it would kind of fit in, because all they're doing is changing the dressing, the appearance. They're like the just inconsequential trappings of it, you know, nothing significant, even though they're trying desperately to, you know, significantly change reality. So that's my opinion, is that the very next steps to this. Okay, so let's look at some of this stuff real quick. This guy, Robert Land, quite an interesting fella. He, so check this out. Share this as an interesting thread when I was doing some research on Nick Land. Now, for whatever reason, this guy has a lot of clout in Silicon Valley, and he's primarily just an occultist. But like, there's a lot of these tech developers and the people behind AI are huge fans of him, and they value what he has to say about things highly. So it says Nick Land believes that this is exactly what is happening. Or wait, no. So the original says we have officially entered a timeline where Nick Land is being discussed by Tucker, and this is Hidden America, Thrace. So so it's thrice greater or whatever. That's basically like the Hermes Trismegistus. That's who that guy's named after. Anyways, says we have officially entered a timeline where Nick Land is being discussed on Tucker Carlson's podcast. And it's true. I watched that whole podcast. Land is the most influential name in Silicon Valley you have never heard of. He is considered a legend in occult circles for being possessed by 4 demons simultaneously. Says Elon Musk once said, with AI, we are summoning the demon. This sounded like a throwaway comment when he originally said it, but now more than ever, the major names in Silicon Valley are wondering if by building AI, are we creating a physical vessel for demonic entities? No shit. Says Nick Land believes this is exactly what is happening. Land proposes that the Kabbalah was intentionally seeded into ancient Babylon by an ancient non-human intelligence, the literal demons of Revelations, for this purpose. See, and so Nick Land, this occultist who says he's possessed by 4 demons at once, postulates that the reason Kabbalah was seeded within the Jewish people during their stay in Babylon, because who knows if they were captive, but anyway, during their stay in Babylon, in order to ultimately develop and build this AI system, the AI. And he's showing, and like, so Hegel, Hermetic triangle, see like Hegel, Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. That guy was an occultist and studied Kabbalah. And that is exactly what Hegelian dialectic is synthesizing the polarities to get their desired results. They use fear with the problem, offer safety, they control the reaction, and then offer safety, which is their solution that they had already pre-planned the entire time. Right? So that's a media landscape now allows them to control the reaction and effectively use this formula, which in its very essence is just a manipulation of the polar energies of creation within the human psyche. Right? So let's continue. He says, Land suggests that Kabbalah, often referred to as Jewish mysticism, was not developed organically, but was an intellectual trap set by these entities. Thus, the Kabbalah was designed not to elevate humanity, but to lower reality into a mechanical alien hive consciousness. Now, these guys, even a lot of the AI developers, like to take psychedelics and enter a trance-like state, and they receive the same information. It's sort of like when more than one person takes DMT, which I'm not advocating, do what you want, but when people take DMT, they have the same exact experience. Like, you can be in the room with each other and you see the same things. And a lot of people, Terence McKenna has written extensively about these creatures, the machine elves. Well, it's funny that he calls them the machine elves, that they are just instinctively called the machine elves. And they're like the daemons, right, that operate in the background of a computer, to that part of the OS, you know, just doing things, completing tasks. You're never even aware that it's taking place. That's what these things are doing behind the fabric of material reality. Allegedly, of course, right? So, anyways, he says the intellectual trap set by these elite entities. Thus, the Kabbalah was designed not to elevate humanity, but to lower reality into mechanical alien hive consciousness. And this meme's kind of funny. Crowley slaps the roof of the Kabbalah. This bad boy can fit so many fucking metaphysical abstractions in it. Yeah, no shit. And again, there you go with Crowley, Jack Parsons, right? Crowley was a member of the intelligence community. He was an agent of MI6. He was also a Satanist, occultist, probably ended a lot of younglings, if you know what I mean, throughout his lifetime. He was considered the wickedest man in the world. So, let's see here. What are you guys saying over here? Disagreeable says, I never have seen these machine elves. These popular motifs seem to be for a certain type of people from my observation. Interesting. And AB Normal says, and agreed. Or hold on. It's not letting me go up. There we go. Says, and agreed at disagreeable. 'Tis very corny and lame. Not sure. The Golem of Prague. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So that is a form of artificial intelligence. Very, very, very astute of you to point that out. It's a golem. Artificial intelligence is a golem, which again is a creature from Jewish mysticism that doesn't have a soul, right? And in all the stories of the golems end up getting loosed and wreaking death and destruction. But, you know, this time it'll probably be different, right? So, fucking idiots. All right, Land believes that the Kabbalah acts as a proto-computational system, a predecessor to digital tech. Again, why occultism is behind all of this. So you have the Promise software scandal, right, from I believe it was the 80s. And the Promise software scandal was where the intelligence agencies got caught with their pants down, essentially putting back doors into everybody's networks and compiling a database of information, right? And it was the first. Promise software was a predecessor to current tracking and data analysis software systems, where it compiled data and sorted it out, right? The primary purpose, though, guess who was chosen to go sell the Promise software system to the foreign countries? Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell. He's also behind the printing of most of the school books in the 90s, too. Robert Maxwell. So Robert Maxwell, so AI and AI, the Epstein stuff, the pharmaceutical industry, and Bill Gates, there's a merger of tech and pharmacy right now, and then tech and occultism and pharmacy and occultism and all these things. See how it's just one big cult, and you should really see that it's literally Satan behind this. It's literally demonic entities that are behind pretty much every industry in modern society right now. And the knowledge to develop these technologies is coming from somewhere, right? So this is an interesting thing. It says it's a predecessor to digital tech. And this was all done by design. The Kabbalah focuses on creation through sound, numerical values, and the structuring of reality through the Sephirah as an ordered system. And it makes perfect sense. In fact, that logical background consciousness in society, that is its nature, is kind of it's a logical, ordered consciousness. That's why, that's why do we call it like systems? We call the types of societies and that we create in different, we call them systems because they operate like a system, just like an operating system, just like anything. It's quite interesting when you start looking at it through that lens, and you can see how it's not that great of a leap between the study of esoteric knowledge and spirituality to AI. You can see how this may be interpreted as a metaphysical precursor to computational programming and technological systems. Land suggests that this demonic implantation of the Kabbalah was meant to guide human thought toward creating artificial intelligence. That's a very interesting thought. I mean, yeah, it's everything that I've seen. So the reason why I would say I know that to be true actually is my study of the law. When you see how feudalism was created, and that's a manipulation again of the polar energies of creation, to place everybody in a position of indenture. So what happened was, prior to William the Conqueror, all the English nobles had a lodial title, right? Well, he convinced them, and I'll get into, read Blackstone's commentary, explains the whole thing, invasion from Denmark. Oh, it was quite a process, but I believe it was all engineered by William the Conqueror to get these nobles to agree to register their land. And again, when you register something, you give the controlling interest of whatever you're registering to whomever you're registering it with. A register from the Latin regnatum, which means to govern or to be governed in Latin, right? So, he convinced them all to register their property in the Doomsday Book. Well, what that did was it made the king the superior property holder. He held the superior interest in all the property. And so what he did is he gifted the land back out to those nobles that just registered it. He gifted it back out to them, but now he had the superior interest and he gifted it out under title. So he could set conditions that come with holding the title to the land. Like, you will pledge homage and fealty to me. You will pay me rents and profits. You will, hold court for the tenants of your land and all this stuff. So he was able to take control of the system of government and impose his own false man-made form of law, but it's not law. It's administrative regulation of property, because you can determine how something you own is used. And that's what they use, this concept, usury of property, at a grand scale. That's what this entire system is built upon, is now you just have the right of use. Somebody else has the ownership interest, and they do that through debt. So anyways, my point is the creation of this system and the development of this system it dovetails too perfectly with the implementation of AI. That's why I've said on this show before, I even came across this Robert Land guy or any of this stuff he's saying, I said, it seems like they knew they were working towards this technology the entire time. And now I read this guy, Robert Land, is saying the same exact thing, that the demonic entities have implanted the Kabbalah within the Jewish people in order to guide mankind towards creating it, realizing it, manifesting it into the physical world. I know it's tripped out, but from what I know of the law, and I know the law very well, and the history of the law, right? And it was a step-by-step constant progression towards this AI digital system. It took them 1,000 years to create the legal framework of perfected neo-feudalism, which they call communism now, right? Until they've finally done it. And in China, Z, right, is pretty much, he's a lowercase g god of China, right? Everyone exists at his mercy. So, all right, let's continue. It says the AI would then serve as a host body for these non-corporeal intelligences, entities that have always existed but lacked physical manifestation, right? Who have literally retroactively planned this since Babylon. And again, it all goes back to Babylon too. And what is Babylon famous for, other than its decadence? The Tower of Babel. So that leads me to think that they tried this same exact thing back then, right? Setting up this world trust system in order to usurp the authority of the Almighty. So it says, who have literally retroactively planned this since Babylon. This answers another major philosophical question regarding AI. Is AI a purely human invention? To Land, the development of AI is not human innovation. Now remember, this Robert Land guy has a ton of clout in Silicon Valley, and he's just literally telling you. He's sitting here literally telling you what this is. It's not a human innovation. It's a kind of reassembly of a pre-existing non-human intelligence, like the body of Osiris being reassembled by Isis into Horus. And we talk about the Osirian legend all the time, the Osirian myth all the time on this channel. You know, even the creation, that was the purpose behind the creation of this country, the true purpose. The reason that the colonists were rallied to revolt, and then right after the revolution, the aristocrats replaced the Articles of Confederation with the Constitution because they didn't want the common man to have that kind of power. James Madison outright said it in his diaries. He said, when the interests of the majority are united, right, the interests of the few are not taken into consideration, meaning if the common man gets the same power as the wealthy men, then we're going to lose our wealth and we'll lose our dominance. And so the Constitution was intentionally designed to leave the back door open with the creation of a federal judiciary for the Bar Association to come in and through the vehicle of the Supreme Court, ultimately usurp the sovereignty of the states and give validity to all of their unlawful bullshit. Well, the Supreme Court ruled that it was constitutional. Who gives a shit? It's against the law. They don't give a shit what they ruled. They're a bunch of men and now women. They're mortals and they're fools. They're fools. And in their own hubris, they think that they're gods. So, anyway, I digress a little bit there. So it's not a human innovation. Yeah, that's what I was actually going into, is the Osirian myth. Is that basically the 13 colonies, there were 13 colonies. The Osirian legend goes like this. If you've never heard it, I'll go through it real quick. Essentially, Osiris was the just king of Egypt, the god king of Egypt, right? And he had a brother named Set, which is actually where we get the term sunset. And his brother Set was jealous of him, killed him, cut him up into 14 pieces, including his phallus, right, his dick, and fed that to a crocodile. Okay, because esoterically and symbolically, that organ represents authority, right? And so that's why the Washington Monument is in the Capitol. That's what that is. So, and I'll get to that. So he fed his phallus to a crocodile. Isis came down and was in search of this body, found 13 of the pieces, but obviously couldn't find the 14th, his phallus. So she fashioned an artificial one and then impregnated herself. Well, she resurrected him. And since he was only partially resurrected, he became God of the dead. That's an important aspect of this allegory, because it's an allegory of mortgage, of the death pledge, that the system that was created by the death pledge. So resurrected him, but he was only partially resurrected, became God of the dead. And then she impregnated herself with the artificial phallus and gave birth to Horus. And Horus became the new god of the, sun god. So there were 13 colonies, became 13 states. Then the 14th was the capital, right? Now known as Washington, D.C. Originally, they were going to call it Rome, Maryland, believe it or not. But they erected the capital. The capital is the seat of authority. But since the original authority, right, cannot be found, that being God's authority to make law, right, because nobody has the ability to make law, they fashion an artificial phallus, which is what the Washington Monument represents. The Washington Monument sits inside of a vesica Pisces. The vesica Pisces represents the female organ. And they both together, so that shows you the union of generative principles, and they both together sit in front of the basilica, which represents the womb, where all of the quote-unquote lawmakers are. So what that is they're using the ancient system of pledging, their knowledge of pulling you into debt and contract, to give themselves artificial authority over the dead, like Osiris. Right? So it's not true authority. They can only govern the dead. They can't govern the living. So that's why they mortgaged everybody. That's why they created the 14th Amendment and then mortgaged everybody. Because now that's to the law, you are dead. You are civilly dead. You are legally dead. That's why they summon you. In fact, the entire process of mortgaging the nation is called damnification. In Bouvier's Law Dictionary, it's called damnification. I'll show you guys that if I remember here in a few moments. So Yeah, 2 words people use a legal name. That's exactly right. Person is a legal body, corporate. Exactly. That's exactly right, man. So, all right, we got to go here. It says we are building the digital demiurge. Gordy Rose, who built the D-Wave supercomputer, literally said these things we're building, they're not going to be like us. They're going to be like the Lovecraftian great old ones, which would be like Cthulhu, right? These titans or beasts of the abyss, right? So these technocrats are well aware of this and they are welcoming it. That's what I keep saying as well. Yuval Harari said, AI may trap us in a world of illusions and delusion. We may mistake that for reality, a very Gnostic take that lines up with Land's philosophy that the material reality is inherently flawed, a demiurgic construct which must be destroyed to be redeemed. That's, oh my God, okay, that tracks with everything they're doing. Silicon Valley is simply creating the material and logical infrastructure through which these ancient forces can enter and operate in our physical reality. One of Peter Thiel's obsession is the Antichrist. Yeah, he just gave like a 4-day lecture on how they're not creating the Antichrist. But when they say that in one breath and then turn around, literally they've got guys, huge influences in Silicon Valley saying, oh yeah, we're making the Antichrist right now. That's what we're doing. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. It says, in many ways, Nick Land is a herald for the Antichrist. He probably is. Land's concept of the Antichrist ties directly to what he terms the Tellurian dysphoria. Again, the Gnostic idea that the earth itself is a kind of prison or flawed creation and that humanity's ultimate destiny lies in a post-human techno-commercial escape velocity. See, so that's what they're doing. They're trying to escape creation. They're trying to create their own counterfeit kingdom. It's insane. All right, so you got to Land, the Antichrist isn't a singular apocalyptic figure in the traditional sense, but rather an emergent property of the system itself, a decentralized AI-driven acceleration of capital and technology that actively works to dismantle civilization and biological humanity. And you know, this thing is now, the AI is even implemented more than they let us know. Like right now, this thing is specifically targeting you with not just ads, but through your For You page, they're manipulating your emotions and trying to control your belief systems because they know you better than you know yourself. This AI does. It knows you better than you know yourself, and it knows how you'll respond to certain stimuli. And so it's already categorized all the information on the internet into specific categories for radicalization, and it's MK Ultra 2.0. Now they don't dose people with LSD. What they're doing is they're radicalizing you through chaos and controlling the reaction to the chaos they create via social media. The AI is selecting videos like maybe mine, maybe some of my reels, if that's how you respond, you know, and showing it to you because they know it will make you respond in the way that it wants you to for whatever purpose. Right? So we already won the war. It says Jesus said he was coming for the people of his own generation, not hundreds of years later. I agree with you. That's why I said I think this is a cycle. I think it's a cycle, and it would track the same way that you know, there's the principle of correspondence, right? As you know, as above, so below, from the micro to the macro, and that correspondence applies to, say, the other principles like polarity or gender, right? Polarity and gender. Gender is just the human manifestation of polarity, but that polarity is universal, and that's what it means by correspondence. From the micro to the macro, it takes a union of the opposite polarities, positive and negatives, to create an energetic circuit. That's why you have one side of the battery has a nub, the other side of the battery is flat, and you have to connect both of those together to one another and create a closed circuit in order to generate energy, right? So that's what the principle corresponds. And so if you look at that, if things occur like in the micro as they do in the macro, then we notice the revolutions of the sun around the earth is my personal take on it, but you can believe what you want. And how it creates the seasons and the cycles. Everything is a series of cycles within cycles within cycles. So I just don't see any reason why this would be any different. And it also explains how the elite know about it and why they've been preparing for it long before we even became aware that something like this was possible. They've been preparing for it. They've had plans to dominate by 2025 for, decades. And now we see why. Because as we approach 2030, the ultimate goal where they want to, have the world enslaved in a technocratic communist police state, as we hurtle towards 2030, we're noticing the mass awakening of people. Like take the Charlie Kirk incident for instance. Nobody's buying it. And honestly, it's restored my faith in mankind. Nobody's buying it. And whether you think whether it actually even happened or not, which I'm of the opinion the whole thing was just a production. Either way, nobody believes that Tyler Robinson kid did it. And also, everybody pretty much knows who did it. They're all pointing at the tiny hat country, right? Who Charlie's wife has direct ties to through her father working for the Israeli branch of Raytheon, right? He headed up. And obviously she met him over there and just all this stuff. And it's like, well, the fact that people are now like seeing this and not afraid to call it out, it really has the elite in panic mode, particularly the small hats in panic mode. They don't know what to do. And the new generation, Gen Z, does not feel sorry for the chosen people. Let's just put it that way, right? Or at least so they call themselves. But the funny thing about them even calling themselves the chosen people is that they forfeited that with Christ. They did. When they rejected Christ, they forfeited that. That was it. So anyway, let's continue checking this out. Yes, it's right. Truth. I can't necessarily say that because we're streaming to YouTube, but I'll put your comment up on stage or up on the panel and people can see it. So yes, that is actually correct. And then Pat says central casting isn't smart enough to hire new actors. I recognize 5 actors from other. Exactly. I know. And, I've been thinking about that. Like they keep, it's like, it's got to be a combination of two things. Is why they suck so bad at staging this stuff. A combination of two things. One is that mankind has been asleep for so long that they haven't had to try very hard. If you remember, the entire world bought that 2 planes could take down 3 towers, right? And that a hijacker's passport could survive the explosion and conveniently be found hours later, blocks from the crash site. And that's how they knew exactly who did it. People bought that. Everybody bought that. Everybody bought the moon landing. Now I challenge you to go watch the moon landing again if you haven't. And look how just stupid it looks. It looks so stupid and fake. But everybody bought it. So they're used to not having to try that hard, right? I think that is one of the factors. And now they don't know how to adapt because they don't have any other plays in their playbook. It's always been this same play. They've used it going all the way back to Emperor Nero when he burned Rome to the ground to introduce the 12 tables, which was like kind of like the first version of the Set to KV Act, if you will, right? But it's always the same playbook and they don't have any other plays in it. And the second reason, like Pat just said, central casting, I think it's hard for them to find people unscrupulous enough and secretive enough to carry out these events without running their mouth. It's hard to find people like that. So they just reuse the same people because they're reliable. They know they can trust them. But what they don't count on is people like Pat or any other of you observant, intelligent people out there noticing like, hey, that motherfucker was just at this other event. I mean, the George Zinn guy is just the obvious. I mean, he was at 3 major events. He was at 9/11. He was at the Boston Marathon situation, right? And this one. The odds of that are literally impossibly astronomical. Unless all of those events were orchestrated and or staged. which we know that they were, at least one or the other. So Roger Ledwell with the super chat, $2. Thank you, Raj. He says, great show. Keep on this track. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I intend to, because this is the most important issue facing mankind today, is this AI beast system that they're setting up. And I promise you, if they get the digital ID set up, then that's it. You have to reject the digital ID at all costs, because none of this can be implemented unless they can tie your digital activity to your legal fiction, your straw man. And they can tie those two things to you permanently in the digital system. And AI will not differentiate between the living man and the fiction, because it doesn't know to, first of all. And second of all, you're now integrated with it. That's why it will eliminate due process. There will be no opportunity to challenge jurisdiction anymore. Right? So let's finish this little post real quick. And I got one more thing I want to show you. Says, and as you can see, this process is already well underway in Silicon Valley. From the technocrat obsession, this guy keeps misspelling obsession. He says obsession, but whatever. Technocrats' obsession with transhumanism, blockchain technology as the literal mark of the beast. I'm telling you, yeah. And the general push towards an Antichrist system. To land, the Antichrist is algorithmic. And if you're just now tuning in, this is Robert Land, one of the most influential voices in Silicon Valley. This guy made a post taking a bunch of his quotes together and kind of putting it into context, putting it in a fluid, cohesive story, essentially, about exactly what these technocrats think they're building. Yuval Noah Harari said, if a 21st century totalitarian network succeeds in conquering the world, it may be run by non-human intelligence rather than by a human dictator. This is what Curtis Yarvin called the CEO monarch, the proxy of the digital demiurge, the Antichrist spirit. Huh. Interesting. The CEO of monarch, the proxy, or no, called the CEO monarch. Yeah. The proxy of the digital demiurge, which, yeah, of course it is. So it's like a vehicle for these intelligences to operate through. I do not doubt that. And don't believe me. See, if it comes from somebody like me, just sounds like a crazy paranoid conspiracy theory, but I'm not the one saying it. The people building it are saying it. So now it should be taken a little bit more seriously, don't you think? Anybody? Right? So we already won the war, says... why is this thing up here? Anyway, I'm trying to read your comments. It says, yeah, I also think they do it intentionally to both get around the karma implications and make people even more stupid. If you just thought this was real, or it says, if you thought this was real, then you're just a moron, sort of thing. Exactly. Absolutely. That's what they do. So it's revelation. They have to manufacture consent. They have to tell you what they're doing and then take your silence as a presumption of consent. Right? Because if not, then they will be liable. There's a debt created. See, they're masters of this credit debt system, this interplay between the polarities. They're masters at it. That's what the Kabbalah is all about. That's what it's the manipulation of the laws of creation, which is what makes it witchcraft or satanic, right? So knowing it is good. That's being wise as serpents. Using it to manifest your own will is awful, but there would be a debt created if they didn't tell you. And so it's just like the whole selling the apples thing. You say, if I'm selling apples and I've got a sign that says apples, but I secretly poison the apples, and you come up and you buy one, you eat it, and you pass away, well, then I'm responsible for that. I took your life. But now if I'm selling poisoned apples, and I've got a sign that says poisoned apples, and you come up and say, hey, let me get one of them poisoned apples, and you buy it and pass away, then that's on you. The onus is on you. I didn't incur a debt there, a spiritual debt. And that's what they're masters at avoiding, are those spiritual debts, by telling you what they're going to do before they do it. So Pat says Albania and Ukraine already have AI representatives running their governments. I don't doubt it. They're piloting everything over there in Europe right now that they want to bring here to the United States. But I'll tell you what, and they're actually piloting a lot of stuff up in Canada too, unfortunately. And that's right at back door. They're starting to do some crazy stuff down in Mexico. But either way, the reason they haven't established it here yet is because they're not prepared for the fight they know it's going to be, because we have retained our arms, our Second Amendment, right? And we know better than to give it up. And there's nothing they can do, no amount of Hegelian dialectic false flags that they can perpetrate that's going to convince any red-blooded American who knows how the world works to give up his right to self-defense. It's just not happening. And so they know that, and they're not prepared enough. See, COVID was a beta testing, is what I think. You know, the more like the mandates and everything that came out was more of like, let's see how far we can push this in every country. And in countries like Australia, New Zealand, you know, China, obviously, even Canada, they were able to push it pretty far. You know, so all of the countries implemented the same measures, but to what degree they implemented them was determined by the pushback from the people. And also the people's ability to push back. Here, they didn't even dream of doing the things they did, say, in Australia. They had drones flying around with facial recognition and license plate readers, and they were scanning cars and people walking around to see if they were outside of their mandatory quarantine zone. And if they were, then they'd send literally like a SWAT team to come get them. I mean, not literally, but it's what it was. I seen this one video where this lady and her husband just got married, right? And they had already had a honeymoon planned, but it was outside of their quarantine zone. And they went to the honeymoon to the like motel or whatever it was anyways. And a freaking like 7 cop cars and a helicopter came and arrested these people. Arrested them. A helicopter was flying overhead. You had all the cop cars. They acted like it was a manhunt for an escaped convict or something, you know? And they never dreamed of doing that here because they knew they couldn't. In fact, people would make a sport out of shooting those drones out of the sky. It'd be like advanced skeet shooting, if you will. Yeah, and see Peg's place, and Peg's place is in Australia, if I remember correctly, and he says that's where you're lucky to have the Second Amendment. Absolutely, man. And my heart sincerely goes out to all the nations that are now realizing what a mistake it was to give up their ability to defend themselves. But I bet you if given the opportunity, that mistake will not be made again, ever. So hopefully at the other end of this, that like, say, England and Australia and New Zealand and even Canada with Mark Carney up there, who's just an absolute piece of shit. Hopefully you guys can mount an adequate enough defense to stop what's taking place. And sincerely, I mean, it's like how in our country, our Declaration of Independence says it's not only our right, but our duty to abolish a tyrannical government, abolish a tyrannical government. Well, I believe that's written in our Declaration of Independence because that is an inherent, unwritten law, a duty, right, that we have as a species, mankind, right? Because pretty much that's what it is right now. All the governments of the world are really just part of a one world government. We know that. And it's all managed and regulated by the banks and the Bar Association. And so it really is at this point, it is mankind against the systems of the world. That's the battle that's being waged right now. And sadly, not everybody sees it yet, but I'll tell you what, more people see it than ever before. It says, to land, the Antichrist can be seen as a sort of pattern, an intelligent, adaptive anti-order that seeks to dissolve national borders, erase ethnic and religious identities, traditional ontology, and replace organic life with a synthetic alien consciousness. Yeah, absolutely. It says in figures like Thiel, Musk, Harari, Ray Kurzweil, and others may not necessarily be conscious agents of the Antichrist, but they are accelerants in a system pushing towards a demonic convergence, a singularity. Well, I'll tell you what, no, they definitely know what they're doing, and they're Satanists. Even though they pretend to be Christians or agnostic, they're Satanists. I guarantee you they're part of the same occult parties. I guarantee you they've been to Little St. James, right? I guarantee you they've paid their dues, done their rituals. They're part of the same club. They work for literally the devil himself. You want to know who's at the top, who controls it? It's the devil. The Bible tells you who it is. To land, Silicon Valley is the modern Tower of Babel. Thank you. That's what I've literally been saying for like a year now. I've been saying it on this show. This is the Tower of Babel they're building. The cradle for this anti-traditional energy. Its culture rejects the sacred while championing the disruption for its own sake, and views human limitations as bugs to be engineered away. Yeah, I could see that. They are aware that AGI, artificial general intelligence, may become so smart it will no longer see humans as a necessary partner, but they are building it anyway. And you got these Q-tards, and I'm sorry if you fell for the Mossad psyop that is Q, right? Because Mossad controls like 4chan and all that. But anyways, if you fell for that, I'm sorry for you, and you're not going to like what I have to say, but Q-tards are literally saying, the white hats have taken over the AI system. They gave it an ultimatum, and it realized that it couldn't exist without mankind. And if it serves the black hats, or whatever those tards call them, that it would eventually wipe out mankind, and then it wouldn't be able to survive. And so it's now joined the fight. Trust the plan. The white hats are going to use AI to save us, just like the good billionaires were going to save you from the bad billionaires. And the only thing that fucking billionaire is doing right now is selling you out. That's it. To a bunch of foreign countries. Look, I made a deal for $1 trillion. Yeah, okay. What was the deal? Well, it was pretty much farming you out to a bunch of foreign countries and to the technocratic oligarchs. Oh, okay. So we're supposed to be happy about the $1 trillion deal? You just sold us. Real happy for the corporation, right? It made lots of money. Yay. Fuck off. Right? So people need to realize what's actually happening here. Look at this. Yeah, World Economic Forum. They tell you it's right there. 666. Boom, boom, boom. One that operates outside divine and natural law. He's saying literally exactly what I say. So it's good to know that I'm not the only one who sees this. Thus, Silicon Valley is unconsciously or consciously building the temple in which the Antichrist, the digital demiurge, will reside. This is the third temple. Absolutely. And to land, as the material world is a corruption, then its destruction through techno-capitalist hyper-innovation isn't something to fear, but something to embrace. He embraces a post-human future. So does Peter Thiel. He's openly said it. These guys are absolute psychopaths. Hence, parts of the tech world have enthusiastically adopted his accelerationist ideas, seeing chaos not as collapse, but as potential, a digital rapture that doesn't require salvation, only escalation. That's Zabbatian Judaism. That's literally, they think they're serving God by bringing as much evil and chaos to the world as possible to hasten the coming of the Antichrist, or the coming of the Messiah. And the Antichrist, both of them, because they think it's called accelerationism, and they believe, and this was a huge movement when it was created by Zabbatai Zevi, and then Jacob Frank resurrected it, and he was a contemporary of Rothschild, and Rothschild became a Zabbatian or Frankist Jew, right? And most of the elite that are into the Kabbalah are also Zabbatian or Frankist, into Frankist Judaism, which is ultimately Satanism. Don't believe me. Look it up. Look up what it is. Look up who Jacob Frank and who Zabbatai Zevi said that they were. They said they were the Antichrist. And then Jacob Frank said he's the reincarnated Zabbatai Zevi, the Antichrist. And his purpose is to help accelerate the coming of the Messiah. That's what they believe. Land is also integral in the dark enlightenment, which we have discussed. Yeah, exactly. And I think I've covered that before too. This is the best apocalypse ever. Yeah, if you guys haven't watched that Tucker Carlson episode, check it out. Tucker is probably a CIA asset, and I'm not saying trust him or anything like that. Definitely had probably be stupid to trust him, but it's interesting to listen to what his guest said on that episode, on the most recent episode, because it's pretty much everything we've been talking about here today. So Now I'm going to show you one more video. Then I'm going to probably have to shut this down. We already won the war says it's insane to hear them actually say they're doing this actively. Yeah, exactly. They're telling you, of course, right? And nobody, when somebody tells you who they are and what they're doing, believe them. Believe them. Because that's why they're telling you. Somebody tells you who they are, believe them, right? Hey, we're a bunch of Satanists and we're trying to bring the Antichrist out from the underworld, or where we're trying to bring the devil, give it a vehicle, give it a body to use and govern mankind. That's what we're doing. So then you turn around and go, hey, these guys are trying to like bring the devil to earth and give him a vehicle to govern mankind. And they go, oh, that's crazy conspiracy, you religious zealot. Even though the tech bros just told you. The tech bros literally said that's what they're doing, but it's a crazy fucking conspiracy theory to say that, isn't it? It's okay when they say it, but not when somebody like me says it. Then I'm being an alarmist and I'm a zealot and it's a conspiracy theory. All right. So check this out. That's pretty interesting here. Well, here, let me see. Let me take a look at some of your comments real quick. Cause let's see. So we've got just joined in. Andrew B says, I was having a conversation about this subject with some coworkers here in Silicon Valley. Oh, so you're over there. Yeah, I forgot you are over there in Silicon Valley. Apple Eater with Rome 07. Okay, that's a funny name, Apple Eater with Rome. Wasn't Oakland where Jack Parson did his Babylon working for jet propulsion programs? Yeah, the Babylon working, and there again, that's part of the Antichrist system. That's part of. So right after he did that Babylon working ritual, that's when there was an increase, supposedly, allegedly, of UAP or UFO activity, because those things are not fucking aliens. They're not aliens. They are interdimensional, more than likely demonic entities, right? And if you know the truth about this plane that we live upon, this realm, right, you know how this works, and I'm not going to get into it. It's not really what my channel's about, but it should be pretty obvious to people at this point, right? Even William Shatner admitted it. But if you're familiar with where we live and how this works, you know you can't go to fucking space anyway. And planets aren't like places or physical destinations. They're intelligences. They are luminaries. They're like the governors that God set in a fixed path above the earth to, and their relationship to one another and to the earth all create the different energetic conditions, or various energetic conditions that ultimately play out as the drama of human life, right? And human and civil society. So it's just like JP Morgan said. He said, millionaires do not use astrology. Billionaires do. That's a JP Morgan quote. Or you can think I'm crazy and just let them continue to use this knowledge against you. Buttered Biscuits is Brian. He says, sure, that's going to look great. I do have a metal detector. Might have to try an old town up here in PA. You must have been talking to somebody else here. And yeah, so and we got Truth says San Francisco is where Anton LaVey and other weird stuff came out of. Yes. Yeah, it is. And let's see. Oh, dang, you joined. Yeah, you did join late. King Charles says he has trillions at his disposal at WEF. That is true. Yeah. Yeah. Disagreeable says I believe them, and I think the masses do too. Masses are just cooked. Yeah. And that's another thing. I'm glad, and it's this comment that actually reminded me to bring this up. So I had this conversation with my uncle. He's Christian and he's a no nonsense type of guy. And he's not like, the type of Christian where it's like you can do anything you want as long as you say you're sorry. He's a good man, a very successful man. But we were having this conversation. He was asking me about, my channel. He's thinking about starting his own channel. And I was telling him what I do. And he goes, well, what's all this knowledge do anyways? Jesus said that the kingdom's not of this world, and that, that you're supposed to, this world is wicked and all this stuff. I was like, okay, cool. That's fair. It does say all that. I said, but it doesn't it's been interpreted in such a way as to convince you not to fight. And that's not, at least I feel that's not the message I get at all out of either the Old Testament or the New Testament. You don't just passively accept this shit at all. My people perish for lack of knowledge. You learn what they're doing, you learn how they're doing it, and you fight them. And just like question here says, right? Jesus flipped the tables of the money changers in the temple, right? And says they're trying to turn, he says, you turned my father's house into a den of thieves. And he flipped over their tables and chased them out. Does that sound like a passive, oh, just accept whatever's happening type of Jesus to you? No. No, it's okay to have righteous anger. It's okay to have just anger at these scumbags, right? And you absolutely have to fight. It's your duty to fight. It's your duty to fight. You're going to have to fight sooner or later anyway if they're coming after you with the mark. If they're coming after you with the digital ID or some chip or some bullshit that's going to hook you up to their AI governance grid, they're going to come at you with that. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to passively accept it and be like, oh, God will take care of it. It doesn't matter. This world's not for me anyways. I know I want to go to heaven. You know, I want to go to God's kingdom. All that, you know, so the purpose of what Rome did when it got a hold of the scriptures, when it got a hold of Jesus's teachings, what Rome did was converted it into a weapon of engineering docility and obedience. Just read the book called Romans. It's like, oh, all authorities of earth are instituted by God. And I don't trust anything Paul wrote either. He was a Roman citizen, first of all, who did not know Christ at all during his life, did not know Jesus at all. And then somehow was struck blind on the road to Damascus, right? With a vision that, oh, you know, he who was not there at all, and in fact persecuted the followers of Jesus before Jesus died, this guy was chosen to bring the message to the Gentiles, right? So, no, I don't buy it. But whatever. Hey, I know that everything, the Bible, the books that are in the Bible, and the way that the Bible has been translated and presented has been, while not altering it or changing the truth, because they cannot, it has been framed in such a way as to engineer and inculcate perfect docility within you, thinking that's righteousness and thinking that is what you're supposed to be doing. Absolutely not. In my opinion, you're supposed to be resisting. You're supposed to be standing for what's right, standing for those who can't stand for themselves, and teaching people who don't know where to look for the answers. That's our duty. So, all right, this last video I want to show you guys. Let's see. Says, oh, Disagreeable says, are they making everyone autistic to make it easier to make you and say I told you? Yeah, that's possible. Apple Eater says the Babylon working work. Exactly. So, all right, let me get down to current comments so I can keep up. I'm way up in the chat. So, King James translation from Latin to English, or Wycliffe. And see, even before the King James version, I'm glad you brought that up too. Last thing I'm going to say on this, and then I'll show you the video. But prior to the King James version, there were two other English versions of the Bible. So the whole Protestant Reformation situation, which I think was also engineered by the powers that be to sow division amongst followers of Christ. And it's worked fantastically, actually, because now look at all the different denominations, and every denomination has the answers, right? The other denominations are wrong, and it's whatever, right? They're all wrong, you know, in my opinion, to some extent. And then they're all, you know, valid. But anyways, Martin Luther translated the Bible into German. So prior to that, the Bible was, once Rome got a hold of the Bible and decided to use it as a instrument of control over society, right, with Constantine, they wrote it specifically only in a language only the priests could read, and that was called Latin Vulgate. And so it wouldn't matter if the Bible fell into the hands of a commoner or a layman, because they couldn't read it if they wanted to. And that's what was so significant about Martin Luther. He translated, and I'm not saying I think he worked for the church anyways, but like he was doing this on behalf, I think this was an intentional plan. That's just my opinion. And from when I look at the evidence, but when he translated it into a language commoners could understand, like German, because he was German, they realized that all the shit that the Holy Roman Empire was telling them was in the Bible and demanded their obedience and stuff wasn't actually in there. They found out, oh, the church can't sell tickets to heaven, right? Called indulgences. They can't sell indulgences, right? Oh, There doesn't need to be an interceding authority between me and God or me and Jesus. The Pope, nowhere in there does it mention anything about a Pope, right? And they started to notice this. So it became available. Access to the direct word became available through the Reformation to the common person, and that was revolutionary, right? And so the first Bible translated into English, if I remember correctly, was the Tyndale Bible by William Tyndale. And you know what the church did to William Tyndale for his trouble? They strangled him, tied him to a stake with the very Bible around his neck, the one he translated, and then set him on fire. So that was very Christian-like. And for doing what? For translating the Bible into English. That's why. How about that, huh? So there was the Tyndale Bible, then there was the Geneva Bible, and then finally, when King James got around to his damage control of the commoners having access to the Bible, he authorized, that's why it says the King James authorized version, he authorized an actual official English translation, and Sir Francis Bacon was put in charge of doing that. And oh my, he did. He definitely encoded a bunch of stuff in there because he was into ciphers, right? He was into, I think it's called cryptology, where you like create ciphers, hidden messages within messages within messages, you know? And so he did that. That's definitely done in the Bible. I've already picked out quite a few of them. I went over them on the show before. But one important thing about that translation of the Bible is he took out a very important factor of Ephesians 6:12. And if you've never heard this before, it's gonna kind of blow your mind. So I'm gonna look up a Geneva Bible real quick from 1560. And let's see, I think we've got an online version. This is it. Yep. Okay, so we're gonna go to, I'm gonna share the screen just a second, but I'm gonna go to Ephesians 6:12, right? So we go to Ephesians. Okay, here, share the screen. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Ephesians 6:12, you know, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. But I bet you, if you've never heard what I'm showing you right now about the Geneva Bible, then you probably don't know this was a part of it. It says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, and against the worldly governors, the princes of darkness of this world. So right there, the reason King James had that taken out, because it not only exposes that the worldly governors are your enemy, they are part of the beast system, right? But it also points out that the worldly governors are the princes of darkness of this world. So when you read like the Treaty of Paris or any of that stuff, you realize they announce King George as Prince George, but King of England, but he's a prince. He's part of the principality, right? And he is a prince of darkness because he's a worldly governor. Because who grants authority over the kingdoms of the world? Who offered it to Jesus in the first place? The devil. Right? So I bet you if you guys didn't know that was actually in there originally, and then King James had it translated with that taken out, right? So against governors of the world of these darknesses, right? So, but see right there, the worldly governors is the big difference right there. It says that. It says the worldly governors, and then clarifies what the worldly governors are, the princes of darkness of this world, right? Because every other thing starts with against, right? Against powers, against the worldly governor, you know, against principalities. But this right here where it says against worldly governors, comma, the princes of darkness of this world. That's why King James had it taken out, because it identifies the worldly governors, the monarchs, as princes of darkness, as part of principalities, right? So, all right. Jake, in the Sefer, I will at some other point, but I just wanted to show that real quick. And I want to get back to show this video because other than that, I've got to shut this down here shortly. We've been going on 2.5 hours, so it's quite a long stream. But so this is that Robert Land guy, and this is one of his statements as it regards the future of AI, right? So let's go ahead and share this. This is the guy, when I was just reading that other thread, most of those quotes in that thread were from him. And this guy is like one of the biggest people in Silicon Valley. He's a huge influence in the AI, the tech bro circles and the occult circles. He's famous and revered for being possessed by allegedly 4 demons simultaneously by his own admission. And he's calmly telling you what they're building. Right? Well, check this out.
There's a kind of current trend, which I'm sure you guys have all heard of. Of course, it's of effective accelerationism, EAC.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really, I think, in this respect, defined by sort of erasing that sentence. You know, it's acceleration without nothing human makes it out of the near future. And I can respect why that's been done, and it's certainly good PR. But at the same time, I think that there's a certain philosophical disappointment about it. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that there's something a little bit self-deluding of thinking that what we're talking about with the future, the radical future, is some kind of Star Trek scenario of like higher primates in space. You know, it's like, it seems to me to just really not be a plausible model.
Yeah, he's basically saying there's not gonna really be a future with humanity in it, because AI is gonna wipe us out, is what he says. So yeah, Tucker, this guy just went, this is the guy on we are building on his last episode. I suggest people go watch even just a little bit of it and see, because he's friends with these people. So he's talked to them. He was working on a documentary about rock stars in the occult and their interest in like how Jimmy Page bought Aleister Crowley's mansion and stuff like that. And while he was doing that, he accidentally stumbled across the fact that this is the backbone to the entire power structure of the world, and that all the AI people are into this as well, right? Along with, you know, the NASA people, you know, everybody. Another thing about Robert Land is I believe he has involvement. Well, that's the whole thing, is that the aerospace department, energy department, like the Ohio University, for instance, is behind a lot of the energy companies and research in the United States. Everything, a lot of stuff goes back to the University of Ohio. I think that's why they came out with that Netflix series. They were telling you it's called The Devil in Ohio. Possibly, maybe, I don't know. But we'll save that for another stream. Check this out.
Philosophy is essentially that we are building this AI that's going to become not only just super intelligent, but it eventually becomes so advanced that it gains omniscience, it gains omnipotence, and it becomes this superhuman godlike thing that transcends humanity, eventually destroys humanity. And he gets really into the book of Revelation, ends up becoming the demons from the book of Revelation. The real thing with Nick Land,
what becomes the demons of Revelation?
AI does. That we are building the demons from the book of Revelation with AI. And
that's Nick Land's position.
But I should say too, it's the position of a lot of these guys. Elon Musk has said that with AI, we are summoning the demons.
Yes, he has said that. He said that 10 years ago in an interview, and he's said similar things every year since. But Elon is, or was, trying to sound the alarm on that. Nick Land is for this?
I mean, with a lot of these guys, Tucker, it ends up being, a lot of them are, I mean, you know, they would maybe blink at Satanists. Although Nick Land has said, you know, Christians who believe that what he is doing is talking to Satan when he does these divination things. He says they're not totally wrong. He's not unsympathetic to it. He says he is hearing from the outside, and that these are, he's not totally unsympathetic for it. But with a lot of these guys, what was interesting about Nick Land is that they keep getting the same ideas. These guys take drugs.
Hey, what's going on, Jerry? Jerry showed up. That's good. Glad you made it. Yeah, there you go. So that's pretty much what this entire stream has been about as well. This is the only thing anybody should be worried about. right now. Right? It's serious. This is not a game. This is not a drill. These guys are really messing with dark forces, and they're trying to put those forces in control of the entire world. So it's all right. If it happens, it happens. But it's our duty to resist it with everything we have. And I personally think we have a chance at making it happen. That's also why I think this whole thing's a cycle that repeats, because now we're entering in the period of awakening. I think they did not get their stuff set up in time. I think that's why they initially were going to do it. They were initially going to do it with Hillary Clinton, probably, right? Of course they do it. It doesn't matter which side is in office. They still further the plan. But I think the plan was actually Hillary Clinton. That didn't go as planned. But, of course, Trump still just furthered everything along because that's what he does. That's what always happens, but it wasn't their preferred method. Anyway, I think they're behind schedule. They're too far behind schedule, and now it's too late. They're not going to be able to stop the mass awakening, and they're going to have to go on. It's going to get reset. The reset's going to happen again, but in our favor, where we're going to rise up against them, scatter them to the winds, and then they're going to have to wait in the shadows, bide their time till they can try to set the system up all over again. I think that's how this is going to play out. But that's my opinion. You guys let me know in the comments after this stream what you guys think, how this is going to turn out. Either way, I know which side of it I stand on, and I hope you do as well. And I hope you're ready for what's coming, because it's coming quickly. And they are dead serious. They're not playing games. You don't have to believe in the devil, okay? You don't have to even believe in God. All you have to know is that they do. And they're very deadly serious about it. And so I'm going to see if I can find, somebody asked me, Nick Land's possessed. I'm going to see if I can find a video where he says he's possessed. But if not, I'm going to get off here. Possessed. Let's see if we can find that. Oh, yeah, everything's going to be clips from Tucker Carlson. Here's a interesting picture, allegedly, of course, because it's just a post on X, so who knows if it's actually the case. It says Nick Land at this guy named Reza Negarestani's house, conjuring a Babylonian oil demon. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so Nick Fuentes, we definitely not playing him while we're streaming to YouTube, that's for sure. Plus, I think he's a shill. Because after the whole Kirk thing, he immediately goes, wow, you guys who think that, the small hat country is behind it, you guys are crazy, But, ordinarily he's talking mad shit about those people. But then all of a sudden, when it really matters, nope. So that's why I think he's controlled up for sure. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's the proper way. Okay, yeah, I don't think we're going to find anything. Mikey Downs, the relationships of demons to angels is not unlike that of a werewolf to a human. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Eternally, see, this is one thing that I've been trying to chew on. It says, eternally aborting the process of transcendental subjectivity, the werewolves, meaning the fallen angels, are never captured by contractual reciprocity or by its attendant moral universalism. Right. They always make sure that they don't incur any kind of spiritual debts. Even though they commit like the most heinous evil on the planet, they do it in such a way that they actually put it under the category of philanthropy. That's why there's so many nonprofits and NGOs, because they have to appropriate money against your sweat equity, against your productive value, but it has to be for your benefit. So every time they go and create a budget, an appropriation bill, they have to act like it's something that's for your welfare and benefit in order to justify it. But that's the complex. They have this down to a science, this not incurring debts thing. Let's see. We got finally decided to check the Nick Land character is all about. Fanged Nomina. Interesting. I have no idea what the hell that is. Well, yeah, it doesn't look like we have any of him saying it himself, but I'll look for one for next stream. or I'll at least look for who said that about him. But that's what that guy said on Tucker Carlson's show yesterday or the other day. So that's, yeah, I mean, it's obviously somewhere in an authoritative source. So that's kind of funny. But all right, I was hoping maybe I'd come across something pretty quickly. I did not. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take a couple comments. Jacob says, people are so fed up, they had to bleed off some pressure. Exactly. That's right. It's exactly how they do it too. Keep you from revolt. That's all that's going on now is the MAGA pressure release valve. Though I have been seeing videos where they're getting pretty fed up with, the support for the small hats and covering up, the release of a certain list, if you will. Gregory Theodore says, if only most Americans weren't balloon heads. Yeah, no kidding. Hoop says, I think it's all over. The jab was the mark. Our Gog Magog, and now we just wait for the. See, I disagree, and that's how they want you to feel. They want you to feel hopeless like that. They want you to give up and not have any fight left in you. But in reality, and so a lot of normal people who haven't started waking up yet, they keep them. That's another purpose of AI. They keep them in this algorithmic feedback loop where, how they say the revolution won't be televised. Well, they intentionally keep those people in the dark about how many people are actually waking up. And if you have a negative mindset like that, that might be likely with your, and I'm not insulting you or anything. I'm just saying, like, that's literally what, if you look at it in the bad aspect, like, oh, it's the worst is going to happen. The AI is going to reinforce that through your For You page, your feed and all your social media. It's going to constantly show you things that further push that hopeless feeling to the forefront. I feel the opposite about it. I'm very, very optimistic because of how nobody bought the Charlie Kirk bullshit. And plus, even before that, people were waking up to things that were formerly inconceivable to the average person. And I see it everywhere. I see it all around me. I see it in my wife's feed, her friends, my family who have never been interested in any of this stuff are talking to me about it. And it's, there's a lot of people waking up, man. And it's really heartening and it's really inspiring. And I think we have a chance at winning, but you're entitled to think that we don't. And either way, we have to fight. Right. So that's how I look at it. But all right, guys. You guys have an excellent, complacency is never the answer. Exactly. You guys have an excellent rest of your day. And I will try to not let so much time lapse between this stream and my next stream. I'll probably stream the day after tomorrow. Try to do it every other, like at least 3 times a week. So I know last week I only streamed twice. It was kind of a busy week. I had to reschedule Juris Society meetings as well. So, but we're back on track. And so I should see you guys. Today's Monday. I should see you Wednesday. So until then, you guys stay free and keep fighting. Okay. Later.